Kang Hyun thought he'd hit the jackpot when he unlocked this insanely OP cheat skill. But he had no clue what he was in for, dude didn't realize what it meant to be stuck never dying, even when he wanted to tap out. Soon enough, he became Earth's most infamous hunter, known for his freaky immortal body. A walking disaster, sure, but also the only one stopping humanity from getting wrecked. This was his endless grind, rising up and flexing on everything trying to take him out. Want more of Kang Hyun's insane journey? Hit that like, share, and subscribe to follow along with every epic resurrection and battle. You won't want to miss what comes next. Stories start with a skelly brother wondered how a human on fire was still alive. The man said he was tougher than he looked. He punched the skelly and broke him. Flashback, a woman yelled at her brother for drinking and gaming instead of looking for a job. She told him to go back to their parents but he refused. She said it was New Year's tomorrow and he needed a job. He agreed but wanted to deal with it later. Kang Hyun felt pathetic, remembering his short internship. He wished life were a video game where he could be a warrior or wizard. Then he fainted. Status windows showed a connection to another dimension but it was blocked. The tutorial for Earth started. Hyun woke up in a white room, seeing a window that said the Haken dimension would connect in 5 years. The tutorial had 8 stages. Death wasn't real there and you couldn't quit. Finishing it gave an awakening and reward. Nervous Hyun thought it was a gamer's dream. He apologized to his family but decided to try his best. The first stage tested his courage, he had to cross a bridge or die. He was taken above lava with makeshift bridges. He confused and saw his sister crying and wondered why she was in his dream. She said it was her line. She wondered if this was even her dream and talking about saving Earth. He told her it was his dream. She questioned the heat and real conversations in a dream while he laughed and saying his brain was easily tricked. He shared a story about a dream where he thought he was peeing but was relieved when he woke up to a dry blanket. She sarcastically praised him for the embarrassing story. Hyun said he would go first and explaining that the status window told them to reach the bridge's end. He called her an NPC which made her mad. She asked if he was scared of falling but he said he would wake up if he died. Suddenly they saw a man fall into the lava, screaming as he burned. They were both nervous. Ian asked him to rethink what he said. Hyun shook and said he was not scared. She warned him to crawl and he agreed. Crawling together, she asked what was happening, wondering if it wasn't a dream. She thought they might die in real life if they died here. Hyun laughed nervously and admitting he was trying to ignore it until his sister mentioned it. He was frozen in fear, lying down and saying he couldn't crawl anymore. He hoped staying still would wake him from the dream. A status window said the difficulty increased because time passed. The area shook and the bridge started falling apart. People panicked and fell so Hyun and Ian ran. Hyun focused on the path but when he saw his sister's bridge collapsing he jumped over, grabbed her and they barely escaped as her bridge fell into the lava. A status window showed Hyun leveled up and temporarily awakened. Exhausted, he collapsed. Ian wondered if there was more to come and thanked him. Her status window showed her stats. Ian wondered what stats like level, strength and agility meant. Hyun joked that it was what every man wanted for his birthday. He checked his own stats and revealing his ability was called resurrection but he had no real skills. Suddenly he woke up in bed, gasping, thinking it had all been a dream. Meanwhile people started texting about having similar dreams where they fell and died but woke up. Posts flooded Reddit and Facebook and it became a hot topic on the news. A familiar man even joined the hashtag Save the World challenge and the countdown to the Haken dimension appeared again. Hyun and his sister shouted each other's names as they ran outside, discussing whether they had the same dream. Their conversation was interrupted by a loud voice telling them to be quiet. They sat in silence until their stomachs growled, deciding to eat first. While eating they saw that all the trending topics were about the dream. Hyun realized it wasn't just a dream since it affected people everywhere but didn't change reality. He noted that many people had fallen in the dream but were still alive. His sister shivered, saying it felt too real and that some might get PTSD. She wondered if it was okay to eat calmly while chaos was happening outside. Hyun thought they should eat first and then looked out the window, seeing looters and people saying the end was near. His sister decided she probably shouldn't go to work that day. Hyun warned her that going out could be dangerous and reminded her about the Haken dimension connection. She checked the status window to see how much time they had left and Hyun who missed the status window and he wondered why he couldn't access it. They saw there were about 5 years left but wondered if they could get ready in time with the world in chaos. They decided to stay home for now. Hyun was surprised he was making sense, though his sister usually thought he was dumb. By evening, South Korea had calmed down, ending the first day. Hyun opened the status window and skipped the tutorial explanation, only wanting to see his stats. He was unsure if they were good and saw a magic power stat and questioning its value. His special ability, Resurrection, let him come back 24 hours after death at his last sleep location with a level decrease and a temporary 50% stat reduction, except during the tutorial. Excited Hyun felt he wouldn't be a useless extra. The tutorial asked if he wanted to enter Stage 2 and he agreed and confident he could improve his stats later. In Stage 2 Hyun fought a goblin with a bloody mace. Recognizing the system from games, he defeated the goblin but felt numb and guilty. He realized it could have been him if he hadn't ambushed it. Seeing something around the corner, he gripped his weapon in fear. Hyun saw a larger goblin behind him, a goblin soldier with a purple aura on its sword. He was shocked realizing goblins weren't supposed to be this strong, especially with a sword over a meter long. A hit from it would be deadly. The goblin, growling with anger, swung at Hyun and knocking his mace backward. Hyun, unfit and inexperienced, and was overpowered by the goblin's blade, which sliced him several times. As the goblin, crying, and dragged Hyun away, leaving a trail of blood, Hyun wondered why he was going through this and when it would end. He desperately hoped someone would come to rescue him. Hyun thought it was hard to know how much blood he was losing until he had felt the fear of dying during his final hours. He had been tortured badly by goblins. He had screamed in pain, waking Hyun, who had found him scared and shaking in bed. Later Hyun had told his sister about what had happened and she had asked if he had died from blood loss. He had said yes, describing how they had pulled out his nails and stomped on them. She had told him to stop, saying her own death had not been as bad. She then had asked why he had screamed and he had said it was something she would need to experience to understand. Even he would have cried over it. She had offered to take him to the hospital but he had said no because he didn't have money. She had told him that if he died the tutorial would end and those who had died in Stage 1 didn't move to Stage 2. Hyun had been relieved and had hoped to sleep peacefully, but he had woken up in the tutorial, surprised he was alive. He had been frustrated, had screamed, and had wondered why this was happening. In the cave he had sighed, had stared blankly, and had felt very hungry. Hyun had gone to the door, remembering how he had picked a mace before because it was powerful but hard to use. This time he had chosen a crossbow and a spear because he didn't want to fight up close. He had aimed and fired the crossbow and surprising himself as the goblin soldier had turned angrily and had drooled. Realizing his mistake with the new weapon, Hyun had been soon overwhelmed. He had charged with the spear, killing a smaller goblin but had had trouble pulling it out. The goblin soldier had attacked him and had killed him quickly. He had woken up screaming, glad he had died quickly this time. The next day he had faced the tutorial screen again, had flipped it off and had not wanted to try again. He had chosen a sword and shield and had studied them all day. He had faced the goblins but had woken up again after they had defeated him. Laughing madly, he had promised to get revenge while someone had watched from the doorway. The next night, the tutorial screen had come back, starting round 4. Hyun had swung his sword blindly, hoping to break the game system. It had worked and his vitality had gone up by 1. He had remembered he had an extra skill point from finishing Stage 1 and had wondered why he had forgotten about it, blaming his tiredness. He had put the point into strength and had gotten ready to fight the goblins. But he had been so tired that he had died instantly in round 5. After another round of swinging his sword, his vitality had gone up by 1. In round 6, after 10 hours of training, he had been able to beat the 2 goblins in front but still couldn't handle the others. By round 7 he had kept swinging his sword and had gotten another vitality point. Sweaty and tired, collapsed and had dropped the sword. Picking up his sword again with determined to defeat all the goblins that day. There were 5 goblins in the second stage of the tutorial, 2 near the castle and 3 in the forest. He had no trouble with the first 2 goblins. He used a crossbow on the first one and a sword on the second. The 3 goblins in the forest were harder. He managed to defeat 2 but the last one was tough. They fought fiercely and sparks flew as their weapons hit each other. The goblin swung its axe at Hyun's shield. Hyun blocked all the attacks, moving his body automatically. He tried to stab the goblin but only slightly scratched its cheek because he was tired from fighting the others. The goblin knocked Hyun's sword away. When it tried to hit him hard, Hyun dodged and used dirt to blind the goblin. He then hit its leg with a rock. The goblin screamed and moved wildly. Hyun went behind it and shouted that he was stronger. As the rock hit its face, the goblin fell down. Hyun, out of breath, wished the fight would end. A status window popped up and said cleared Stage 2 and received 5 extra stats, plus a choice of weapon. He had also unlocked basic shield and crossbow skills. He was very happy and shouting about his new level ups and laughing about his victory. He turned into a pixel art monkey and greeted the day with a good morning. After tasting his food and finding it perfect, he heard a loud noise. Ian came out and asked about it. The status window announced the end of the world tutorial and the ability to use the system freely. They rushed outside to find a big gate with a purple glow which they thought might be a dungeon entrance. They realized the gate would affect the world soon. If the dungeon wasn't cleared in time, monsters would come out. They had almost 5 years before this happened. Hyun said that with dungeons starting the world was in more chaos than before. They decided to stay inside and look for information. Hyun noted that the tutorial wasn't completely over and only those who had recently had birthdays could join now with a minimum age of 16. Ian mentioned that people were talking online about dungeons and urged those who had passed the tutorial to clear them quickly. Hyun ignored this and focused on something more interesting, the status windows he could see in real life. He excitedly called for the status window while Ian cringed at him. The window said the feature was unavailable because the tutorial was still going. Hyun noted that since he had repeated stage 2 7 times, others must have finished it already. He sighed with knowing he had to clear everything and asked for information on stage 3. Ian said it was about patience but there were few details because few people had finished stage 2. Hyun decided to keep going, feeling strong. That night a golden liquid appeared in the tutorial while a monster sang, showing that it had been trying to calm Kelly while hiding its anger. We got some backstory. In stage 3 he had to prove his persistence by defeating the Gorka chief. He saw he was wearing a ghillie suit and guessed that the mission was about sneaking and killing. Not knowing much about Gorkas, he decided to find them first. He checked his rewards from stage 2 and saw that he was now level 4 with better stats. He noticed new shield and crossbow skills but was annoyed that they were low rank. He put skill points into strength, vitality and agility. He then remembered he had forgotten something, checked his inventory and found a sword which he was excited to use. With everything ready and he went out to find the Gorkas. He thought about Carlos Hathcock, the famous marine sniper he admired who had crawled 1.4 kilometers to kill a general. After crawling for about 10 hours he saw he was almost there and spotted 2 guards. He wondered if he would have to fight them. His pants were wet, the grass was itchy and bugs were crawling on him. A shadow fell over him and he looked up to see a Gorka looking down. At first he was worried he had been discovered but then he realized he hadn't. Feeling more anxious he told himself to keep going and prove his persistence. Losing control he charged at the Gorka and stabbed it in a sensitive spot. The Gorka fell and Hyun laughed, noting he cut off something useless. The remaining Gorka screamed and called for help. Surrounded, Hyun used a line which he always wanted to say and activated his new skill, Raging Lion Roar, and rushed into the fight, laughing and saying he was going to rock their world. With Lion's Roar lowering enemy morale and stats, Hyun cleared the camp of 3 Gorkas and went to the chief's tent. He knew Gorka warriors hunted during the day and came back at night, making the camp weak in daylight. He sneaked into the chief's tent and announced his arrival. He was surprised to see purple lights and the Gorka chief sitting on a throne with 2 shamans using magic to trap him. Realizing this was part of the challenge, he remembered that Lion's Roar could remove debuffs. He used the skill, freeing himself and surprising the Gorka chief. Hyun jumped forward, saying everyone had a plan until they got hit by a sword and killed the chief. With stage 3 completed he got body regeneration and the title Impatient One, which improved all his stats. He thought about how quickly he had progressed, finishing stage 3 in a day compared to a week for stage 2. He felt he might be very talented and could clear stage 4 quickly. After a month we learned that special teams had cleared 40% of discovered dungeons. The government was offering rewards for these achievements. Hyun was heard screaming and a neighbor commented on his loud behavior. She asked if he had been hit by an arrow and was surprised when Hyun came out, bragging about his success. She was startled by his appearance and wondered if something had happened in his dream. She asked why he looked so angry and he said the tutorial was annoying him. She told him to cheer up, saying he looked like a criminal. He asked what she meant and told her not to talk like that to her brother. She asked about stage 4 and reminded him he was staying at her house for free. He explained it was a group project to remove the dungeon core and that they needed to escape without leaving anyone behind. He compared it to role play with party members acting like NPCs. They debated whether to continue or retreat because they were running out of food. Some strongly opposed, but they decided to continue. She asked what was wrong and he said he had been fine while carrying them and boosting morale with Lion's Roar. Thanks to a recovery ability from clearing stage 3, he stayed on the front lines, using magic to heal no matter how hurt he was. She asked why it had taken him a month to finish. He sighed and remembered the night they had attacked him with a knife and ignoring his orders. He ate and explained that every attempt to reach the dungeon had failed with similar problems each time. He had to use his wits to overcome them. She asked what he did. He put down his chopsticks and laughed, saying he just beat up everyone in his way before clearing it. In the final round of Stage 4, one man had suggested continuing despite the risk of returning empty-handed. Another person mentioned their food was running low and asked what they'd do if they couldn't find the core, suggesting monastones might still be worth something. Hyun, growing angry, used his lion's roar to silence them. When someone questioned him, Hyun threatened to kill anyone who didn't follow his orders. Hyun's girlfriend looked worried. Hyun warned them to follow him or face death, noting his increased stats. A skeleton attacked, but Hyun grabbed its blade and smashed its skull. He declared it the last one, and they watched in amazement as he defeated all the monsters alone. Hyun then approached the dungeon core and broke its supports with one swing. A status window appeared, congratulating him for clearing Stage 4 and awarding him the Cleave skill, the Ring of Strength and Mind, rank B, and a level up. He noted that his rewards were great and that the Mona stones, including the skeleton soldiers and night stones, which might be useful later. The Cleave skill was straightforward and the ring made him immune to rank A or lower mind-type magic and mental conditions. Hyun was pleased with his rewards. Sweat dripped onto the floor as Hyun, now very strong, and did 301 arm push-ups thanks to his sandwiches. He realized that exercising without weights wasn't enough anymore and considered going to the gym. His phone rang, showing an alert about a newly opened dungeon and advising people to stay indoors. Outside, there were screams and chaos as goblins broke in and people were killed while running away. Hyun, shocked by the destruction, and realized it had been a while since he had requested to clear the area. Worried about his safety, he searched his apartment for a weapon and grabbed a kitchen knife. Running outside, he took a deep breath and shouted at the goblins, who turned to look at him. He knew he couldn't use his skills but had their attention. They charged at him, and although he couldn't hear their goblin chatter clearly, he sensed their strength from their movements. He quickly stabbed one in the head and thanked it for coming first. Hyun then grabbed its sword and ready to use it. He arrived at an office building where doors were barricaded and goblins were trying to break in. The Hyun looked at her phone, wondering what Ian was doing as the barricades began to fail. Hyun's voice was heard from outside, humorously mentioning he had accidentally broken a flip-flop and telling her that her brother was here. He certainly looked like a criminal. He walked in, waving at Ian to let her know he was there. She became embarrassed as everyone in the office wondered who he was. She asked, "What's with his get-up?" seeing him covered in blood. A man yelled at Hyun, angry and confused. The man said Hyun had destroyed their barricade, risking the monster getting in. Ian said Hyun was her department chief and Hyun apologized. He explained that he couldn't control his strength but assured them not to worry about the monster. He told them to look behind him, showing a pile of corpses. They were shocked that he had defeated so many alone. He suggested they pick up weapons, saying even ordinary people could handle a goblin if they stayed calm. As he turned to leave, Ian yelled, asking where he was going. Hyun said he had seen goblins everywhere and thought the upper floors were full, too. He wanted to clear them out so he could sleep well that night. Later, as water was poured on his wounds, Hyun asked Ian if it was okay to waste it since they didn't know how long they'd be stuck. She told him to be quiet and said it was a saline solution. She sighed, commenting that he acted tough but still got hit a lot. Hyun admitted he hadn't practiced dodging and depended on his regeneration skill, but since he couldn't use his skills it wasn't helping. She warned him to be careful, reminding him that he couldn't come back to life without his abilities and that taking on the remaining monsters might be too much. He smirked at her and said still it was kind of cool, right? She sighed, saying it served him right for getting beaten up, though others seemed to see him differently. One of her seniors even asked her to introduce him, wondering if he was interested. He blushed and said if she was okay with a guy who curses a lot, then sure. That night, he woke up to a status window, realizing he had forgotten about it because he was too focused on the day. Stage 5 began and he needed to prove his wisdom. He heard talk of a succubus and thought the people who talked the most were suspicious. A girl tried to calm things down while he watched. The task was to defeat a succubus, a nightmare demon disguised as a human. He remembered that succubus in stories drained men's energy and looked like beautiful women. All the women there were stunning, which made him suspicious. A girl asked for his opinion and he noticed how beautiful she was up close and her scent tempting. He nervously said he wasn't sure. Then a window appeared. The Ring of Strength and Mind had resisted a seduction attempt. The ring granted him protection against mind-type magic. By the campfire he thought about earlier stages. Stage 1 was Hellfire, Stage 2 was a week of goblins, Stage 3 had him crawling and getting pissed on, and Stage 4 was a month-long ordeal. Now he saw a chance for an easy win and apologized for cursing at God, thinking it was all part of the plan. He remembered the warning, identifying the succubus made him a target. Unsure of her strength, he decided to win over the NPCs, especially the women, since the men might be under her spell. He decided to sleep on it. He woke up in an unfamiliar place with Ayan's group. Coworkers told him the army had arrived. He thought the succubus had killed him in his sleep. He saw soldiers firing at goblins. Everyone cheered, thinking guns would handle the monsters. But something felt wrong. As the soldiers reloaded, he realized there's no end. The soldiers joked around, shooting a red goblin that shrugged off bullets and decapitated one of them. They panicked, firing more rounds as the goblin charged. The driver sped off but the goblin leaped, cutting down the soldiers in midair. Their truck crashed into another and Hyun watched in horror as the goblin wiped out the men in the back. The goblin looked up at him, glowing with a sinister purple aura. Some soldiers wondered what was going on. One of them said that Squad 3 had been wiped out. Corporal Jung Jae-hoon asked where the signaler was, as they needed reinforcements. He had a headache from a car accident and saw the red goblin licking its lips. He wondered about the reinforcements and was told they would send a civilian talent, their version of Awakeners. Jung was frustrated and said one person wouldn't be enough. The goblin jumped off the truck and Jung tried to shoot but his gun jammed. As the goblin attacked, Hyun threw a piece of concrete, hitting the goblin and knocking it down. Jung was surprised and asked Hyun what he had done. Hyun climbed onto the truck, asked if they were okay, and smiled oddly, saying many people depended on him. Jung panicked, pointed his gun at Hyun, and called him a monster. Hyun told him to lower his weapon and said he was human. Jung repeated, human, and Hyun asked if he had had a stroke. Jung thanked Hyun for his help despite being caught off guard. Hyun said he wasn't there for justice, saw the goblin getting up, and wanted to deal with it now. Hyun told the soldiers not to shoot because stray bullets could hit him too. He asked if they had tear gas. Jung said they did and instructed them to use it. Hyun said he didn't need a gas mask and told Jung to warn everyone not to shoot, as everyone would die if he didn't kill the goblin. Jung ordered the soldiers to wear gas masks, stay alert, and shoot only at approaching monsters. Hyun went after the goblin, saying he was ready, and held a grudge. Jung pulled the pin on the tear gas and the goblin screamed and flailed. Hyun remarked that goblins panic when they're in pain. He attacked, knocking the goblin's axe away and hitting it 6 times. Hyun felt his hand tingle but continued attacking, urging the goblin to die. Jung was amazed by Hyun's strength but noticed that Hyun was exhausted and hadn't inflicted severe injuries on the goblin. Jung wondered if he should use a joint lock but only knew how to swing his sword. The man from the truck said, "Excuse me," and jumped in, slicing the goblin. The goblin screamed but it wasn't clear if it had any effect. Hyun asked who the man was. The man said it felt like cutting through rock and noted that the goblin was just the boss of an F-rank dungeon and probably had a weakness. Hyun agreed but didn't know who he was. They both attacked and Hyun asked if the man had a plan. The man said the goblin seemed to be running out of stamina. Hyun agreed but questioned the point of exhausting it if they couldn't inflict damage as his sword broke on impact. He spotted the goblin's axe and ran for it. The man advised Hyun to target the goblin's weak spot while he distracted it. Hyun grabbed the axe and saw that the goblin's eyes were protected. He decided to aim for its joints and stabbed with the axe. The goblin and the masked man looked shocked when Hyun's axe landed in an unexpected place, right in the goblin's ass. Hyun began to feel down and apologized to the goblin. He wondered whether hitting the anus was crucial, thinking it might not cause instant death. Quickly deciding, he executed his move, Sphincter Opener 9000, by lifting the goblin and slamming it down behind him. The goblin was in pain so Hyun pulled the axe from its rear and charged at it, questioning whether it also affected the mouth. Since the goblin was still reeling from Hyun's forbidden technique, Hyun stabbed it in the mouth, causing blood to spill everywhere. Hyun sighed as a man with a gas mask watched, both impressed and curious about Hyun's skills and affiliations. Hyun noticed a golden window behind the goblin, indicating that the item's details could not be checked because the tutorial was still ongoing. He decided to take the item, lamenting the absence of an inventory and wishing for the tutorial to end. The man with the gas mask called out but Hyun, having defeated the goblin alone, insisted that he had urgent business and left, claiming the smelly axe for himself. The man watched Hyun leave, removed his mask, and wondered about Hyun's background. Several hours after defeating the hobgoblin as dusk fell, Hyun walked his sister home through streets that resembled an apocalyptic scene. They finally arrived home after dark. His sister asked if he had left the door open. Hyun admitted that it seemed so. She sighed, lamenting her belief that he had matured, and said they should clean up before eating. She wondered if any food was left, though she wasn't concerned about possible intruders. They made stew and ate it. His sister was shocked by something on the news and showed Hyun her phone, which displayed a video of him fighting the Red Goblin, filmed on the street near the company the day before. Hyun read the comments, noting that the feedback was mostly negative. One comment called his face evil and criminal-like, which upset Hyun. His sister confirmed the criticism and said she had been trying to tell him this. Later, as he went to bed, Hyun told his sister they were in big trouble and asked her to turn off the lights. She was annoyed by the request but agreed to do it just this once, reminding him not to complain in the morning. Hyun promised her a beer and a story about the day's events. She told Hyun that his confidence seemed like a death flag and wished him good luck, not expecting much. Hyun lay down but couldn't stop thinking about the goblin and the man with the gas mask, wondering how far he had progressed. Although he wasn't supposed to get past stage 2, he was determined to clear stage 8 and surpass everyone. He reflected on the succubus from yesterday, who despite killing him, excited him. As he tried to sleep, he smiled and thought that a bit of candy from the tutorial wasn't so bad. When he opened his eyes, expecting to see the succubus, he was shocked to find a hideous blue demon. He punched it in surprise and the demon fell unconscious. Hyun wondered if it was a goblin. A status window appeared, instructing him to evade the goblin horde and clear the goblin cave, noting that the goblins had poor eyesight but excellent hearing, and advising him to find a distraction. Frustrated by the sudden change in tutorial content, Hyun yelled in his sleep. Meanwhile, in a PC cafe, a man was being attacked. As he fell, he looked up and questioned why someone who hadn't participated in the tutorial could be more potent than an ability user. The attacker responded that strength meant little without fighting skills and noted the exciting ability users, including Hyun, whom he found intriguing. He started licking his lips, contemplating his next move. They moved on to stage 5, round 3, where the objective was to defeat a monster known as the doppelganger. This creature was notorious for hiding among people and consuming humans at night. Both paladins and mages had access to a special ability that they could use once a day. Given the large number of people present, it felt akin to finding a succubus in the first round of a game, similar to Mafia. He contemplated proving his wisdom and took a deep breath. By using Lion's Roar, he commanded everyone to gather, which took many by surprise. He proclaimed that anyone who moved would be considered the culprit. Later, in the privacy of his room, he reflected on the fact that the talkative individuals often met their end first in Mafia games. This realization left him feeling frustrated, especially because he had never managed to win a single Mafia game. He thought about grabbing something to eat, feeling disheartened after failing for more than a month. He decided to talk to his sister, adjusting his glasses as he mentioned that he had been reborn with a new appearance. She was shocked by his new look and appeared exhausted from work. He told her that he had been stuck on the stage for 53 days and had died 53 times. She suggested that he use his wisdom to pass the stage, noting that even a MENA member had been unable to solve it. She humorously added that it might be faster for him to use someone else's brain rather than for him to get smarter himself. Her suggestion surprised him. She then advised him to use his money to soundproof his room instead of purchasing a suit, pointing out that the loud subwoofer installed by the lady downstairs was causing a disturbance. Determined to prove his wisdom, he returned to stage 5 and found himself in a cave. He was taken aback to learn that his mission was to clear an F-rank dungeon called the Tank's Hatchery. He encountered the spitting tanks guard inside the dungeon, which was level 20. He needed to identify its weakness and devise a strategy to overcome it. Seeing the spitting tank scream and expel venom, he decided to charge at it directly. When the venom hit his hand, turning it a dark purple, he suspected it was poison and, in a desperate move, cut off his arm to prevent the poison from spreading further. While the tank was momentarily confused, Hyun seized the opportunity and attacked it. Despite a hint indicating that the tank's weakness was concealed, Hyun chose to cut the spider in half with sheer brute force, disregarding the provided clues. He believed that identifying weaknesses was irrelevant as long as he managed to kill the enemy. A notification appeared, congratulating him for clearing stage 5 and awarding him with Giant's Power, which enhanced his strength by 12 for a duration of 10 minutes. He gazed at his regenerated hand, thinking that brains were meant for those with weaker bodies. The Giant's Power, he realized, made his muscles stronger through magic. The scene then shifted to a school where someone approached Kwon Minsu, requesting a birthday punch. Minsu, exhausted from the tutorial, suggested postponing it for later. The person inquired about how stage 1 had gone, and Minsu admitted that it had been as frightening as rumored, but he had successfully cleared it. He expressed concern about what lay ahead, as no useful tips were available from stage 5 onwards. His friend mentioned that clearing stage 4 placed one in the top 1%, and valuable information was likely being kept secret. Minsu noticed an update: someone had cleared stage 7 and was about to challenge stage 8. His friend expressed skepticism and Minsu read the details. Stage 4 was about demonstrating leadership through strength, stage 5 valued physical prowess as a form of wisdom, stage 6 required the destruction of both enemies and allies, and stage 7 focused solely on eliminating enemies. They both laughed, thinking it might be a trick while online comments mocked the claims. They observed Hyun, who had successfully cleared the stages, looking upset because his tips were being ignored. A woman asked why he was making a fuss and he insisted that he wanted to share advanced strategies that no one believed. She called him nosy and old and he replied that he would prove himself by clearing stage 8, aiming to be as accomplished as figures like Han Seon or Choi Dong-woo. His sister laughed and pointed out that he was comparing himself to those who cleared it in one go versus those who took months. He retorted that he had managed to clear stages 6 and 7 consecutively. That night the tutorial welcomed him again, allowing him to enter the final stage 8 and review his rewards. In stage 6, he received Bilgeon's longsword, a grade B weapon that granted berserker abilities and enhanced durability. He obtained Ronald's B-ranked armor in stage 7 which had self-repair capabilities. He hoped to clear stage 8 to use these items in the real world and check the hobgoblin drop. When stage 8 began, the window changed and he asked about his beliefs. He thought it over, but then the area shook. The floor cracked and he fell into the void, screaming. When he opened his eyes, he found himself on a city street. A woman passed through him, making him wonder if he was in some formless state. He had never seen a city in the tutorial before. He questioned whether this was Earth but soon realized it was not, as the people were not human but looked like Mark Zuckerberg. They lived like humans but had different appearances. He was unsure what to make of it and noticed one of them making eye contact. He wondered if the man could see him because he was staring, but quickly realized that wasn't the case, as they were not looking at him from behind. A rift opened, releasing a horde of monsters. The citizens panicked and fled from the onslaught. He saw familiar and unfamiliar monsters and the chaos was far beyond the dungeon opening he had faced 2 months ago, resembling an apocalyptic scene. He wondered if Earth might look like this in 5 years when the Haken dimension connected. His heart raced as a giant shadow appeared, revealing a colossal entity reaching toward the fleeing citizens. Hyun tried to block it with his hands but the attack phased through him. A bright light made him close his eyes and when he opened them, he was back in the dream area. Confused, he wondered what he had just witnessed. A voice asked how it felt as a formalist approached him. Hyun landed and asked if she was a deity or something similar. She replied no, but as a dimensional administrator, she was there for a personal interview and welcomed his questions. He asked if the scene he saw represented Earth's fate. She explained that it depended on their actions moving forward. Hyun questioned why she didn't intervene herself if she was so powerful. She clarified that as an administrator, she could only maintain balance and that status windows and tutorials were her limits. Annoyed, Hyun waited as she prepared to ask her question. Hyun told her to proceed, but she asked what he believed in and lived for. He was confused by the question and asked why she cared. She said watching humans had made her curious. She found humans interesting, but Hyun was annoyed by her comment. He said that people didn't think deeply, they just tried to be happy and survive each day. She asked if there was something he wanted to protect. Hyun said he tried to protect his younger sister and parents. She then asked if he had ever thought about being a hero. Hyun sighed and said that after dying a few times, he had realized he wasn't cut out for that tough job. She said heroes had natural talent and Hyun wasn't very talented. Hyun wondered if she was trying to start a fight. She said she was a fan and enjoyed watching him in the tutorial. Hyun thought she was odd but asked if the 5th stage changed every time. She didn't answer and said the time was up. She congratulated him on finishing stage 8 and told him the tutorial was a warm-up. More challenges were ahead and she believed he would become a hero who saved the world. He asked if she was doing the 5th stage, but she congratulated him again. As he was being pulled away, he yelled at her, calling her a son of a bitch. After he left, she looked forward to seeing him again. A message appeared saying he was the 62nd person to graduate and had earned the title of tutorial graduate. He said that stage 5 had been her doing. He woke up, trying to scream, but his mouth was stuffed with a smelly sock. A woman told him she had expected him to cry, so she had put the sock in his mouth first. He asked if the sock had been essential and she replied that if he was upset, he should wake up quietly. Seeing his expression, she assumed he had failed again and asked how long he thought it would take this time. He laughed like a villain from an anime and checked his status window, surprising her. He bragged about his new abilities and his brother's power. She said it was time for him to make money and mentioned breakfast as a special treat. He complained that she should at least congratulate him and called her cold-hearted, noting that she didn't have a boyfriend. She hit him with a spatula, killing him and ending the mana. After eating, she left. He looked at his status window and saw that his new title from clearing stage 8 gave him +2 stats, but it wasn't imposing. He wondered if titles didn't stack at all, but the chosen title applied at 50%. He decided to use the tutorial graduate title. He opened the box and found a book. He exclaimed, "Reveal your true nature." Magic Explosion is a skill book about a powerful magic orb. Hyun felt intense when he realized the book was a skill book. He started shaking and shouted that it was gas. After 4 months of shouting in public, Hyun finally learned to scream silently. The status window prompted him to learn the skill and he agreed. The book vanished as Hyun acquired the skill. He decided to apply to the Talent Awakened Abilities Training School. And Myung, a new worker at the school, was overwhelmed by the crowd. The school certified people who had completed or failed stage 1 of the tutorials. Initially excited to see future heroes, Myung became frightened when she saw Hyun. His face looked very different from his ID picture, making her fear he might harm her. She broke down, asking why he was doing this. Hyun was confused and asked what the problem was. Others whispered and recorded him. Hyun insisted he had done nothing wrong. Kim Lee Hyun approached, questioned the delay, and asked to see Hyun's ID. Hyun recognized Kim Lee's name. Myung handed over her ID and Hyun explained his appearance had changed due to skill but confirmed it was him. Hyun offered to provide a fingerprint or DNA test if Kim Lee doubted him. Kim Lee was surprised and asked if Hyun had only cleared up to stage 5. Hyun confirmed and downplayed his achievements. Kim Lee revealed his level was 12 and asked about legal dungeon raids. Hyun admitted he had entered a few times before the law. Kim Lee Hyun inquired about Hyun's strengths and unique abilities. Hyun said it doubled his strength. Kim Lee then asked for the rewards from stages 3, 4, and 5. Hyun demonstrated his self-healing ability from stage 3 by biting his arm and showing how it healed. Kim Lee was surprised. Hyun presented a ring from stage 4 and explained it had been mistranslated as his strength. He revealed Lion's Roar for stage 5 and asked if he could demonstrate it. Kim Lee agreed. As Hyun prepared to shout, a man from the PC cafe recognized him and covered his ears. Hyun let out a scream, startling everyone, including Kim Lee Hyun. Hyun asked if that was satisfactory, and Kim Lee confirmed. He then directed Hyun to the first floor of the nearby building. The blonde man left, smiling and pleased with his find. The MC nearly got rejected earlier because he didn't quite match his ID photo, but after unleashing his fierce lion's roar, he feels like he might have gone overboard. Now, sitting inside the lecture hall, he notices people whispering, trying to confirm if he is the guy who shouted at a woman so intensely that she fainted. Our boy just munches on his food, listening to these distorted rumors swirling around him, but he doesn't really mind. Behind him, a man keeps staring, watching him closely. Just then, Lee Hyun makes his entrance, thanking everyone for their patience. He introduces himself as the head of the Songnam branch of the Talented Education School and says he is pleased to meet them all. The students respond with a polite round of applause. Lee Hyun then explains the program. For the next 10 days, they will be studying theory in the mornings and diving into practical sessions in the afternoons. All their meals and accommodations will be provided here on site, and as long as no one causes any major disruptions, everyone should be able to finish safely and earn their certificates. Turning serious, he addresses the group, pointing out that it has only been half a year since the world changed. Even now, new information about dungeons and monsters keeps pouring in, with tactics and strategies constantly evolving. So, he tells them, the things they will learn here won't be the final answers. Hearing this, our hero thinks to himself that his words sound a bit heavy and even slightly discouraging. But Lee Hyun continues, adding that some information may end up being inaccurate or quickly outdated. That is why he plans to focus on teaching only what they truly need to survive. He expresses his eagerness to work with all of them over the next 10 days. As the first period wraps up, Lee Hyun calls for the students to take their seats after the 10-minute break. The MC is staring off into space, feeling trapped in this dull routine, much like that mind-numbing reserve force training he once had to endure. And now he realizes he is stuck with this for the next 10 days. Out of the corner of his eye, he notices a hand extended in front of him. Looking up, he sees a man introducing himself as Gwak Suiel, reaching for a handshake. Our boy takes in Suiel's muscular frame, then shakes his hand and introduces himself in return. Suiel's lips press together in a thin smile, and he tightens his grip and says he is looking forward to working together. But deep down, he is smirking. There is a hint of superiority in his eyes, a silent message that our hero needs to be put in his place after causing that stir earlier. It's clear Suiel already has a bit of a grudge against him. But as the seconds pass, his confidence wavers. He cannot believe it. How is the MC standing up to his grip so easily? Meanwhile, our boy quietly activates Titan Strength, and a system message flashes before him. Titan Strength, B, boosts muscle power with magic, raising strength by 12 for 10 minutes. Now, this simple handshake has turned into a silent test of strength between them. Suiel feels the pressure growing. Despite all his stats focused on strength, he realizes our boy's grip is even stronger. Frustration starts to bubble up in him, especially since people around them are starting to watch, curious if a fight is about to break out. Pride keeps Suael from letting go, but our hero's grip is relentless, pushing his nerves to their breaking point. Not long after, the worst happens, a sudden snap, and Suael's hand bursts, blood splattering onto the desks nearby. Both the MC and Suael freeze, staring in shock at the mess. In the midst of the chaos, the man who was staring at our hero earlier begins to drool at the sight of the mess. An ambulance finally pulls up to the campus, its sirens fading as it comes to a stop. Inside the building, our boy is defending himself, getting more frustrated with each passing second. He insists that everyone has misunderstood the situation. He explains that it was not his fault at all, it was the muscular guy, Suael, who approached him first, offering a handshake. And out of nowhere, his arm just swelled up, and, pop, it exploded. Lee Hyun, not quite convinced, asks if our hero really expects him to believe that. The MC, now feeling the tension build up, says that if he doesn't believe him, he is going to go insane. He is getting seriously annoyed at having to repeat himself. He argues that if it were not for his unique ability, extreme strength, which boosts his strength by 1.5 times, he might have been the one hurt, not that guy. Frustrated, he urges Lee Hyun to check the CCTV footage if he doesn't believe him. But Lee Hyun catches a slip-up in our boy's words, pointing out that he had said his unique ability was called manly strength before. Our hero freezes for a moment, realizing his mistake. He quickly covers it up, awkwardly muttering that it was manly strength, the one he meant. But Lee Hyun is not done. He reminds the MC that he once mentioned his ability doubled his strength, not just increased it by 1.5 times. Our boy forces a smile, looking away, trying to cover his tracks by saying he must have mixed up the numbers because he is bad with them. Lee Hyun stares at him for a while, then sighs as he says he understands and tells our hero to just go back to the classroom. Back inside the classroom, the MC slumps down into his seat. He sighs deeply, thinking to himself that it is only the first day, and already it has been a total mess. Just as he settles, someone greets him from the side, asking if it's okay to sit next to him. Our boy glances up, his mind already tired of dealing with strange encounters. He tells the person to sit wherever they like, thinking, first, the muscle guy, and now a delinquent. The guy smiles and introduces himself as in Yu-sung, and our hero, though still a bit distracted, introduces himself as well. Yu-sung then asks if he can call him Hyung, explaining that he just turned 18 and came to the school after finishing his tutorial. He adds that he graduated from high school early, so he is technically younger but still feels like he should address him that way. He reassures the MC that he can speak casually to him. Our boy, surprised, notices that Yu-sung doesn't look younger at all. In fact, just by looking at him, he seems like the older one. Yu-sung then asks our hero how he pulled off the thing with the older guy's arm, the one that made it go pop. He says he was really impressed and wonders if it was some sort of special skill. The MC, looking at his expression, realizes there might be something off about him too. He lets out another sigh, then admits that he didn't do it. It was all because of the muscular guy, he was the one who caused it, not him. Just then, Lee Hyun steps into the classroom and announces that the second period is about to begin, asking everyone to take their seats. He quickly opens the multimedia and explains that, since the class was delayed, he will skip over the extra details and focus on the main points. He starts by discussing dungeons, stating that they are currently divided into two categories, ordinary and irregular. Dungeons are the more common type, and they usually break after about 4 weeks of being created. He explains that, from their experience, everyone should know that a dungeon break refers to the moment when monsters begin pouring out of the dungeon. He then shifts to talking about irregular dungeons, which are much more unpredictable. These dungeons do not follow a fixed schedule, so their break time could happen earlier or later than expected. Because of this, they require a lot more caution when dealing with them. To stop a dungeon break, there are two main approaches. One is to destroy the main core of the dungeon, which clears it entirely, and the other is to periodically destroy the normal core to delay the dungeon's break. However, he warns that they need to be careful about the order in which they attack the cores. Just as he continues explaining, a man interrupts, grumbling that he doesn't need to know all this and asking if Lee Hyun really expects him to sit through this useless education. The MC quickly notices that it is another muscular guy, and, like Suael earlier, he mutters to himself that these macho types are always a problem. What he doesn't realize, though, is that he himself fits the description of a macho guy. The assistant immediately steps in, warning the man that if he causes another disturbance, he will be expelled from the class. However, Lee Hyun calmly tells the guard not to worry and signals the man to come down. The man, confused, asks what he wants. Lee Hyun repeats himself, telling the man to come down here. The man mockingly asks if he has any pride and walks down with his arms open, clearly ready for a confrontation. Lee Hyun pulls out his phone and tells the man to wait for a moment. After a brief pause, he informs the man that, for the next minute, he will only be evading and blocking the man's attacks, showing him the timer on his phone to make it clear. He adds that if the man even manages to land a single blow, he will graduate him immediately. On the other hand, if the man fails to hit him, he will be expelled from the class. He then asks the man if he is up for the challenge. Meanwhile, our boy and Yu-sung are both getting annoyed because Muscle Man number 2 is acting way too cocky, showing off more than they can stand. But even though they are irritated by his attitude, there is still a sense of excitement building up inside them. The man locks eyes with Lee Hyun and asks if he is trying to belittle him. Without waiting for a response, he draws his sword, clearly hoping that Lee Hyun will regret his confidence. An assistant nearby quickly steps forward, trying to stop them, warning Lee Hyun that fighting with real swords is dangerous. But Lee Hyun brushes off the concern, assuring him that everything is under control. He then invites the man to come at him. Frustrated by Lee Hyun's relaxed attitude, the man's anger boils over, and he charges, gripping his sword tightly and shouting as he swings. Yet Lee Hyun dodges the attack with ease, pointing out that such an obvious move will not work. He remarks that even if the man is not aiming from behind, using surprise in an attack is one of the basics. The man grows more furious and takes another swing, but Lee Hyun steps aside again. Coolly, he tells the man that his problem is his overblown movements. Any skilled opponent would exploit such delays without hesitation. The man's irritation only intensifies. Determined to prove himself, he keeps swinging wildly, but Lee Hyun dodges each blow smoothly. Unbothered, he tells him that swinging aimlessly will not help and that he must pay closer attention to his opponent's movements if he wants to land a hit. Enraged, the man snaps back, shouting at Lee Hyun to shut up, then lunges forward with all his might, yelling that he will make him regret his words. But Lee Hyun dodges again, calmly explaining that while powerful swings may seem impressive, they often make the user's weak points more obvious. As if to prove his point, he quickly kicks the man's sword mid-swing, sending it flying upward until it lodges in the ceiling. Finally, he takes out his phone and holds it up, showing the man that a minute has passed since the fight began. Around them, the other students stand frozen, stunned at how effortlessly Lee Hyun handled the battle. Meanwhile, our hero recalls watching a video once where a pro boxer dodged an ordinary person's punches effortlessly, just by weaving side to side. Back then, it seemed impressive, but now, standing against an awakened opponent like the man, he realizes the skill gap between him and Lee Hyun is on a completely different level. Lee Hyun's agility and reaction speed are astonishing, something that even with all his own stat increases, the MC doubts he could match without serious difficulty. As he imagines what might happen if he went head-to-head against Lee Hyun, he cannot help but feel a surge of excitement. But he is not alone. Beside him, Yu-sung is practically radiating that same energy, clearly pumped at the idea of a potential battle. When our boy glances over, though, he catches a look in Yu-sung's face, a weird, almost unsettling gleam, and suddenly wonders if the guy might actually be a little bit of a psycho. With a sigh, he starts regretting letting him sit beside him, hoping nobody mistakes him for being that kind of intense. At the Talented Education School, the daily routine is straightforward. Theory classes fill the morning, while afternoons are set aside for hands-on practice. Today, as the students gather for their practice session, Lee Hyun, their instructor, steps forward to address them. He explains that today's focus will be on weapon skills. After his brief introduction, he invites each student to come forward, one by one, to receive their training weapons. Once everyone has their gear, he instructs them to start practicing in their own way. An assistant, he explains, will eventually move around to check their forms and offer corrections. Apologetically, he mentions that because they are short on staff, they cannot provide one-on-one coaching for each student, and he asks them to bear with this limitation. Our hero inspects one of the training swords, noting that the blade is dull. Just as he finishes his inspection, Yu-sung appears beside him and remarks that the weapon practice sounds a bit boring. Suggesting they shake things up, he proposes that he and the MC spar with each other instead. Our boy also gets intrigued by the idea and asks if Yu-sung is really up for a fight. But before they can go any further, Lee Hyun cuts in with a reminder that sparring is strictly prohibited until the 6th day. Annoyed by the restriction, our hero mutters under his breath in frustration. The students soon begin training with their weapons, each going at their own pace. As the MC watches, he finds himself underwhelmed by their skill level. He didn't expect exceptional abilities, but he realizes their level is even lower than he initially thought. Feeling that he doesn't need the practice himself, he decides to swing his sword a few times just for the exercise, treating it more like a workout than serious training. While he is at it, Lee Hyun notices him practicing, but it's a nearby assistant who first comments on his technique. Observing our boy's movements, he suggests that he narrow his stance a bit and adjust his sword's angle. Though our hero's form looks impressive, the assistant adds that it won't be practical in real combat. Surprised and somewhat annoyed, the MC glances over at him, wondering what this guy is lecturing him about. The assistant doesn't back down, continuing to say that our boy will understand once he faces combat in a dungeon and that his flashy moves won't hold up there. Fed up, our hero grabs him by the collar and asks if he is really that skilled. In response, the assistant challenges him back, asking if he wants to put that to the test. For a moment, tension hangs in the air, but after a pause, the MC decides to let it slide, choosing not to escalate the situation and keep things from getting too messy. After watching their exchange, Lee Hyun calls out to assistant Kim Sung-han, clapping his hands to grab everyone's attention. He announces, much to everyone's surprise, that our boy and Sung-han will perform a demonstration for the group. Sung-han and our hero both freeze at his words, as they feel unprepared for the sudden declaration. Lee Hyun instructs Sung-han to fight in the style he previously advised, while the MC should simply fight as he usually does. The goal is simple, each of them will aim to land just one hit. Handing a sword to Sung-han, Lee Hyun reminds him that it's just a demonstration, and a single strike is all they need. Sung-han, still a bit hesitant and slightly confused, grips the sword, while our boy stands at the ready, focused and calm. With a countdown, 3, 2, 1, the battle begins. Both rush toward each other with swift movements, and our hero is the first to strike, swinging his sword at Sung-han. Sung-han raises his sword to block, managing to hold off the initial attack. But the MC quickly strikes again, this time with even more power behind his swing. Sung-han's sword flies from his grip, soaring into the air, and he finds himself on the ground with his sword clattering down behind him. The students watch in stunned silence, eyes fixed on the scene as Lee Hyun begins explaining. He tells the students that the weapon skills they are practicing are not just basic techniques, they are meant to train their bodies to react immediately in real combat situations. The most critical skill, as the MC just demonstrated, is the ability to respond in an instant. He advises them not to think of the techniques they are learning as the absolute answers in every fight. Finishing his explanation, he calls for a round of applause for both our boy and Sung-han. Our hero, completely wrapped up in his own proud thoughts, doesn't catch a single word being said. Lee Hyun then approaches Sung-han, extending a hand and offering an apology for any embarrassment he may have caused. Sung-han accepts his hand, assuring him it's fine and admitting that he actually learned something new. He even mentions how the outcome surprised him. Lee Hyun reassures him that there is no need to feel embarrassed. Noticing the MC and Yu-sung talking and laughing nearby, he glances their way with a serious look, adding that he just needed to confirm something important. Writer Kang Hyun's training diary begins with day 1. Right off the bat, some buff guy keeps pushing his buttons, testing his patience. Our boy finally snaps and teaches the guy a lesson, deciding that is the only way to keep the peace. Then there is this guy, and Yu-sung, who is acting way too friendly. Something about Yu-sung seems a bit off to our hero, maybe a little crazy. The theory class was a total snoozefest, and the afternoon training doesn't do much to make it any better. Day 2 doesn't offer much improvement. In the morning, they are supposed to be learning tactics or something like that, but it all seems pointless. By the afternoon, they are moving on to weapon skills, which Yu-sung seems way too enthusiastic about. The MC makes a mental note to avoid him. The assistant even steps in to tell Yu-sung that swinging his sword like that is dangerous. The guy has got way too much energy. It's day 3, and Yu-sung is still the only person trying to strike up conversations with our boy. To him, though, he is like a buzzing mosquito that just won't go away. Sparring is technically off limits, but they end up doing it anyway, bending the rules for the sake of a bit of fun. By day 4, our hero is officially bored out of his mind. He starts messing around with 2 swords just to kill some time, but the assistant immediately tells him it's 1 weapon per person. Day 5, and the MC's feeling even more restless. He is starting to wish he could just pack up and go home. He tries meditation, but even that doesn't really help. On day 6, boredom hits him hard again, and he has got to do something to shake things up. He tells Yu-sung to go out there and cause some trouble. Yu-sung reminds him that he was the one who said they should lay low and graduate quietly. Our boy shrugs and says it's not his problem if Yu-sung ends up getting expelled. Yu-sung mentions how easily our hero throws out these brutal comments without a hint of hesitation. Then he mentions that it's day 6, which means sparring practice in the afternoon. Yu-sung grins, saying his gut tells him something entertaining might just happen. On the afternoon of day 6, the sparring practice is in full swing. The MC lands a strong blow, sending his opponent crashing to the ground, who lets out a painful grunt. Lee Hyun steps forward, officially declaring our boy the victor, then calls for the next group to get ready. As our hero makes his way back to his seat, Yoo-sung leans over with a grin, complimenting him on his fighting skills. He even mentions noticing how he took down that assistant earlier. The MC shrugs it off, replying that his opponent was simply weak, that's all. Yoo-sung then asks why he is being so humble all of a sudden. Watching the ongoing sparring matches, our boy reflects quietly. He finds himself wondering how to put it, but the whole thing honestly feels like child's play. The overall skill level of the fighters is not particularly high, and though he doesn't know much about talent, he figures that regular people just cannot progress through so many levels. They have said sparring practice will continue until the 8th day, which means he has got 2 more days of these tedious matches to endure. Meanwhile, on the stage, 2 men are going head to head. One of them draws his sword, poised to strike the other. But just as he brings it down, the sword stops an inch away from the other man's face. The man, who had shut his eyes in fear, cautiously opens them and finds the blade barely missing him, thanks to Lee Hyun's hand stopping it just in time. Lee Hyun declares the match over, announcing trainee Kim Chong-woo as the winner. Amid the crowd, our hero watches this scene unfold, confirming his earlier thought, Lee Hyun is genuinely skilled. If he has to face anyone in a serious fight, he would prefer it to be him. As Lee Hyun calls for the next group to step forward, Yoo-sung rises, telling the MC that he will be back. Our boy nods, though he notices Yoo-sung's sly expression. Watching him go, our hero feels a slight twinge of nervousness. He is fairly sure Yoo-sung is up to some sort of mischief, and that thought brings a hint of worry. But as his gaze lands on Lee Hyun, he reassures himself. With him overseeing the sparring, surely nothing too serious can happen. Yet, despite that comfort, he still cannot shake a lingering question in his mind. Before the sparring match begins, Lee Hyun speaks up, informing everyone that Yoo-sung's opponent, Lee Yu-lee, won't be using the standard training weapons. Since Yu-lee is a mage, she will instead be using her personal weapon. He explains that this gives her both an advantage and a disadvantage, particularly with distance. He asks Yoo-sung if he has any problems with this setup. Yoo-sung replies that he has no issues with it at all. As they prepare, Lee Hyun's eyes fall on Yoo-sung's weapon. It's different from what he remembers. Yoo-sung typically uses a sword, but today he is holding a heavy mace. He remarks on the change, wondering aloud why he switched weapons. Yoo-sung replies that there is no rule limiting him to a single weapon. Lee Hyun nods and then instructs both of them to take their positions, announcing that the match will start at the count of 3. The countdown starts, and as soon as it hits 3, the match is underway. Without wasting any time, Yu-lee immediately uses her magic, launching a powerful attack at Yoo-sung. But Yoo-sung swings his mace with precision and breaks through her attack, shattering it into pieces. A cold, sinister smile appears on his face. Our boy watches closely, intrigued and amazed. This is the first time he has seen real magic in action, and he cannot help but wonder if they can learn magic depending on how they clear the tutorial. He also wonders why he had not seen any magic used during martial arts class. Was that something they were trained for separately? Meanwhile, Yu-lee uses her magic again, this time summoning a giant crystal that she hurls directly at Yoo-sung. Yoo-sung briefly glances at Lee Hyun, who is looking back at him with equal intensity. With a swift motion, Yoo-sung swings his mace and steps forward. Using his feet, he delivers a powerful swing, redirecting the crystal in a way that the MC had not expected. Our hero, watching closely, starts to worry, wondering if Yoo-sung is shifting the trajectory of the crystal to send it flying right toward Lee Hyun. To his shock, Yoo-sung does exactly that. The massive crystal is now headed straight for Lee Hyun. In a split second, Lee Hyun manages to dodge the crystal, but it smashes against the ground. Before anyone can even process what happened, Yoo-sung moves in swiftly. Lee Hyun turns just in time to see Yoo-sung holding Yu-lee in his grasp. Suddenly, blood spills everywhere as Yoo-sung stands there, covered in it, with his mace like a maniac. The sight is both disturbing and intense, and the MC, along with the audience, watches in stunned silence. This is when our boy truly realizes that on day 6, Yoo-sung is far more unpredictable and dangerous than he ever imagined. Someone shouts urgently for Instructor Sung-han to grab the first aid kit and calls out to Instructor Lee Min-hyun to contact 911. Min-hyun, already on the line, relays the details, as he informs them of an open fracture on the right hand and urges the responders to come as fast as they can. Yu-lee groans in pain, and Min-hyuk bends down beside her, reassuring her to hold on and stay strong. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun keeps his weapon firmly pointed at Yoo-sung, and he demands to know what is going on. Yoo-sung, calm and unfazed, simply says it was an accident. Accidents happen in sparring, after all. Lee Hyun glares at him and questions if he even hears himself right now, but Yu Sung only holds his calm smile, not saying a word more. Lee Hyun seems to have more to say, but after a long pause, he just sighs. Instead of pressing further, he announces a 20-minute break, instructing everyone to be back in their seats by 3 o'clock. He then turns to Yu Sung and tells him to follow. Yu Sung nods and quietly falls into step behind him, following as instructed. As they leave, the MC's eyes fall on Lee Hyun's dagger. Something clicks, and he recalls a soldier he saw earlier, gripping a dagger that looked exactly like the one Lee Hyun carries now. Even after the incident, sparring practice carries on as usual for 2 more days. Yu Sung is not expelled, he is still part of the training sessions like everyone else. However, he seems to have gained some special attention, as the instructors keep a close eye on him. Our boy, watching from the sidelines, cannot help but think that Yu Sung's recent wins come more from opponents forfeiting than from his own skills. Another thing catches our hero's eye, a healer station nearby. He has heard they are hard to come by, so seeing one here makes him wonder if it is connected to Yu Sung's presence. Either way, with all these things going on, the 8th day seems to pass without any issues. But then again, maybe it has not quite passed just yet. In instructor Kim Lee Hyun's office, the MC stands confidently before him, showing clear determination as he declares his desire for a match with real swords, especially now that training is nearing its end. Lee Hyun watches him with a blank stare, then lets out a sigh and asks if he really cannot just quietly get through the last 2 days, since it is almost over, after all. He mutters about how exhausting the students have been this time and points out that barging into an instructor's office like this is hardly appropriate. But our boy is not giving up. Meeting Lee Hyun's gaze, he asks whether he is just tired or if he is actually enjoying playing along with this childish game. Lee Hyun remains silent, offering no answer, but our hero is not backing down. He comments that it seems like Lee Hyun is itching for a fight too, adding that sitting around reading and filling out paperwork is not exactly his style. Then, leaning in close, he whispers in his ear, reminding him that, after all, they have met before. Lee Hyun glares at him intensely. As they move to a new location to begin the battle, the MC gets to know that Lee Hyun was that trainee from all those months ago. Lee Hyun, despite the late timing, offers his thanks, acknowledging that it was because of our boy's actions that they managed to prevent further casualties. Our hero, though grateful, waves it off as no big deal, silently hoping Lee Hyun has not noticed that he had snatched the item and taken off with it. Lee Hyun, however, doesn't let it go and mentions that the MC has reached stage 5, marveling at the sword in his hand. He asks if it isn't a reward for clearing stage 6. Our boy replies that he found the sword along the way, not giving much detail. Lee Hyun calls it a lazy excuse and opens his system interface. He figures our hero is not planning to be completely honest with him, no matter how many times he asks. So, he summons his weapon and says if the MC won't answer his questions, then he will just fight using something he picked up along the way too. Then, in the blink of an eye, he jumps and appears behind our boy. Our hero quickly feels the shift in the air and readies his sword, barely blocking his attack. Looking at the MC's reflexes, Lee Hyun notes that he thought our boy was all about strength, but it seems he is also quite fast on his feet. Our hero easily blocks Lee Hyun's sword with his own and responds, saying that being good at just one thing would only make him an easy target. He adds that Lee Hyun doesn't need to hold back since he has his healing skill to rely on. Lee Hyun agrees and says that if that is the case, then he won't be holding back any longer. And with that, he disappears. Now moving at an incredible speed, Lee Hyun circles the MC, launching a series of quick, sharp attacks. Despite his rapid movements, our boy manages to block each strike with precision. Lee Hyun notices the ridiculous physical endurance our hero has and can hardly believe how well he is holding up. The MC, on the other hand, is thoroughly enjoying the fight, laughing and saying that this is exactly what a spar should feel like, full of energy and excitement. As the fight continues, Lee Hyun observes his attacks hitting our boy, and it is then that he realizes the healing skill our hero boasts is just as good as he said. So, he decides to ramp things up, planning to land a blow that the MC won't be able to avoid, hoping to create an opening for himself. He attacks our boy's hand, and though the blade manages to pierce his skin, it doesn't fully sink in. Instead, the blade gets stuck between our hero's ulna and radius bones, causing Lee Hyun to pause in confusion. But the MC, grinning, pulls his hand back and uses the momentum to yank Lee Hyun toward him. He then headbutts him, sending him crashing to the ground. Lee Hyun's glasses fly off as he stumbles, and after a brief moment, he accepts his defeat. Some time later, Lee Hyun cracks open a soda can and, sitting next to the MC, admits that he is truly impressed by his strength. Our boy, sipping his own drink, responds by saying Lee Hyun is strong too. He then remarks that while the spar was fun, it was pretty much a draw, since skills are not supposed to be used in a spar, even though he ended up using his. Lee Hyun says that if that is the case, he will call it his win by default. The MC lost for breaking the rules. Our boy protests, claiming that passives cannot be helped, but Lee Hyun just lets out a relieved sigh, thanking our hero for the match. He admits it helped him blow off some steam and relax. Standing up, he tells the MC to get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow, they have a practice dungeon raid, and it is important to be well rested. Late at night, outside a quiet dungeon, a sign stands out, warning that this place is under the ownership of the Talented Education School and that entering without permission could lead to a lawsuit. A figure cloaked in shadow steps forward, studying the door carefully. They glance around, making sure no one is watching. After a tense moment, the dungeon door creaks open just a crack, then shuts tightly once more. Just outside the dungeon door on the next morning, Lee Hyun gathers the students, explaining the purpose of this particular dungeon. He begins by telling them that the Talented Education School chose this dungeon, Kika's Forest, as a training area. It is an F-rank dungeon, meaning it is among the easier levels. However, the monsters here, the Kikas, are stronger than the average F-rank creature, giving the students a greater challenge. Despite their strength, this dungeon was chosen for two main reasons. First, it is a field-type dungeon, so there are not any traps or hidden hazards. The only danger here comes from the monsters themselves. Second, the Kikas don't travel in groups, so the students can lure and fight them one by one, making it ideal for practice. After explaining this, he assures them he will go over more details once they are inside. As he finishes speaking, two assistants move forward and pull open the dungeon's gate. Watching the door swing open, our hero realizes this is actually his first time entering a dungeon in reality. In the tutorial, he was already inside the dungeon, so he has never experienced crossing through a gate like this before. Stepping through, he feels a strange floating sensation, and when he opens his eyes, the scenery around him has completely changed. Looking around, everyone can feel they have entered the dungeon's unique world. Our boy turns to Yusung and asks if they can return to where they came from after passing through something like this, whether it is called a portal, a gate, or whatever else it might be. Yusung replies, reminding him that, as they covered in class, they can go back if needed. Feeling slightly annoyed, the MC tells Yusung not to talk to him, recalling that he is being labeled as a psycho partly because of him. Yusung, however, reminds him that our hero was the one who spoke to him first. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun begins by explaining that the instructors will first bring in a Kika to demonstrate how to handle one. After that, they will all split into groups of 5, and each group will have a Kika to hunt. He then turns to the instructors, signaling them to get started, and tells the students that while the instructors are out luring in a Kika, they will move to a more open area that is better suited for combat practice. As they move, he begins giving more details about the Kikas to make sure everyone understands what they will be dealing with. He explains that Kikas are monstrous creatures that can grow a little over 2 meters tall and look somewhat like giant, aggressive ostriches. They are known for having strong, nimble legs, and their large beaks are incredibly tough, able to crush even metal plates, making them extremely dangerous. Because of this, it is important to stay cautious around them. The standard strategy, he says, is to surround a Kika with multiple people to hold it in place before going on the attack. Just as he is explaining, a system window suddenly appears, announcing that the main core has been destroyed and that a portal leading outside has opened. Immediately after, everyone's status windows show a warning that the dungeon is about to collapse and urge them to leave quickly. As the core around them begins to crack, people's panic rises, and they start rushing in every direction. Lee Hyun calms everyone down and instructs them not to panic and to leave through the portal one by one. They have to get out before the dungeon collapses entirely, but he reassures them there is plenty of time as long as they stay orderly and don't push. The dungeon door finally opens, and everyone makes it out safely. Outside, the crowd begins to settle, but whispers quickly start spreading. People wonder aloud about what just happened, questioning if the dungeon site has been destroyed and if that means it is officially cleared. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun is busy counting heads, making sure everyone got out in one piece. Just as he confirms the count, an assistant calls out urgently, pointing back at the dungeon entrance. A dark, ominous energy is seeping out from within. Lee Hyun's heart skips a beat as he realizes the danger. It's a dungeon break. Without wasting a second, he orders an instructor to go and request immediate support. Then he turns to the trainees, urging them to back away from the dungeon and get as far from it as possible. Our boy walks over, looking concerned, and asks him what is going on. Lee Hyun feels a wave of relief seeing him and explains that there is a dungeon break happening. He then asks if the MC would be willing to help on the front lines. Our boy asks what exactly a dungeon break is, and Lee Hyun goes on to explain, if the core of the dungeon is broken before they defeat the boss monster, the entire dungeon collapses, and all the remaining monsters come rushing out through the portal. That is what they call a dungeon break. Lee Hyun then asks if our hero doesn't remember this from their theory class. The MC, a little embarrassed, admits he does, but quickly tries to save face by claiming he just wanted to test if Lee Hyun knew. Lee Hyun calls him ridiculous and says there is no time for his jokes now, the kaikas will start flooding out any moment. Just as he is about to assign our boy his role, the kaikas begin appearing sooner than expected. Lee Hyun quickly glances at them, wishes our hero good luck, and rushes forward. The MC calls after him, complaining that he didn't finish explaining, but Lee Hyun is already moving toward the other trainees. He tells them to gather in groups of 5 and warns them that from now on, if they do not follow his orders, they could lose their lives. Our boy stands there watching, realizing he has been left to handle the situation alone. He sneaks a glance at Lee Hyun and mutters to himself that he must be expecting him to face all this by himself. He calls out to the kaikas, challenging them to come at him. As he prepares himself for the fight, he suddenly hears someone else shouting. To his surprise, Yu-sung appears out of nowhere, swinging his massive mace. He brings it down on a kika, smashing it to the ground, leaving our hero a little stunned by his sudden and bold entrance. Yu-sung doesn't stop there, hitting the creature again and finishing it off with ease. The MC calls his name, and Yu-sung, shaking with laughter, says how he always knew that crushing them with a mace was the best way to go. Our boy, annoyed by his over-the-top antics, scowls but doesn't say anything. Yu-sung, meanwhile, keeps attacking the kaikas around them and mentions that our boy should not hog all the fun for himself. Our hero, irritated by his craziness, cannot help but feel a bit grateful for his unpredictability. Having someone like him on their side does make things a little more reliable. He then draws his sword and jumps into the fight, slashing through the kaikas with precision. As he takes down more of them, he calls out to Yu-sung, warning him to cover his ears. He then activates his Raging Lion's Roar skill and starts shouting at the top of his lungs, calling the kaikas bird-brained fools. As his voice rings out, the system window flashes, showing that all the kaikas' stats and morale have taken a hit. The nearby people start whispering, speculating that the kaikas seem to be weakening, and some even wonder if the strange sound just now came from the MC. Lee Hyun, who is watching from a distance, also takes note of the effect. He wonders if this skill of our boy is some kind of area-wide debuff that weakens all their enemies. His mind starts to race, thinking that with support arriving soon, they could end this battle much faster than expected. But, of course, there is still the bigger problem. Our hero suddenly shouts mana explosion as he attacks a kika, sending a powerful surge of energy through his hand. The magic burns his skin, and he thinks to himself how dangerous this skill is. It is only usable because he is the one using it, he doesn't think anyone else could handle the strain. Yu-sung watches in surprise and asks if that was magic. The MC, still recovering from the burn, simply replies that it is just a skill he picked up recently. Yu-sung, while fighting off another kika, asks if he got the skill during the tutorial. Our boy smirks and replies that it is a secret. Suddenly, Yu-sung's attention shifts, and he points towards something in the distance, the heavy footsteps of a giant kika. The status window appears, identifying it as a mutant kika. Lee Hyun immediately recognizes it as a boss monster. He curses under his breath, frustrated that the support has not arrived yet. Even though the MC has faced boss monsters before, the size and sheer power of this one present a different kind of pressure. He knows that even with Yu-sung's help, taking on a real monster of this size might be more than they can handle. Yu-sung, however, seems unbothered, his eyes lighting up with excitement. He turns to our boy, telling him that it is his turn now and urging him to let the youth take the chance. Our hero, equally fired up, declares that he will take the monster for himself. Someone mentions that tomorrow is the completion ceremony and asks if there was an accident during today's dungeon training. Lee Hyun confirms there was, explaining that someone broke into the practice dungeon and deliberately caused a break. They suspect it is part of the dungeon terrorism that has been happening since last month, a series of attacks targeting training dungeons. The woman he is speaking with nods, then asks if any of the students stand out to him. Lee Hyun, as he flips through a report, says there are indeed 2 students who do. He explains that these students managed to defeat the dungeon boss known as a Kika mutant. Hearing this, the woman leans in with interest, and he begins describing the first student. According to Lee Hyun, this one possesses remarkable physical strength, with power, speed, and reflexes that could rival a monster's. But above all, his greatest asset is his healing ability. This student is fearless in battle, unafraid of injury, and blends his impressive stamina with a combat style that is unpredictable and aggressive, making him a daunting opponent. He then shifts his attention to the second student, who, he notes, is of a completely different type. Lee Hyun calls this one a genius, someone with a rare talent for combat. He praises the student's quick decision-making, sharp instincts, and impressive knowledge of gear, all of which make him stand out. However, he adds that this student's excessively violent character is a significant flaw, something that could be challenging to handle in the future. The woman comments that it is rare to hear Lee Hyun speak so highly of anyone, despite the student's temperament. She then asks if he has gone as far as to send a recruitment offer. Lee Hyun reminds her that recruiting a student in training is illegal, and she says that he is as rigid as ever. He gives a small smile, remarking that it is only natural for a subordinate to take after his boss, the Dungeon Guild Master, Han Seon. Then, more seriously, he advises her to return to the guild, adding that he has a bad feeling about the recent incident. She nods, agreeing with his instincts. The man standing on stage gives his speech, acknowledging the hard work everyone has put in over the past 10 days. He says he hopes that they all continue to grow, eventually becoming true masters in their fields. With those words, he wraps up the completion ceremony. The students respond with enthusiastic applause. Among them, the MC finds himself wondering if this man might actually be the principal, as he has never seen him before. Until now, he assumed that Lee Hyun was the person in charge since he often saw him around. Now, standing outside the school, a man lowers his head in a respectful bow and announces that the ride, the God Ride, has arrived. Our boy glances over at the luxurious car parked nearby and remarks to Yu-sung that he must be pretty wealthy to afford something like that. Yu-sung invites him to hop in, offering him a ride home. Grateful, our hero thanks him, and as he is getting into the car, he cannot help but say how unbelievable it feels to be riding in such a fancy car. Just then, someone calls his name. The MC looks up to see Lee Hyun approaching. Surprised, he asks if Lee Hyun came over just to say hello, commenting that he is a bit friendlier than he had expected. Lee Hyun responds, saying that it is not exactly that, but, sure, let's just say he did. Then he explains that because of their efforts during the dungeon break incident yesterday, both of them will be receiving a reward soon. He adds that they were among the most helpful people on the scene and tells them to expect further contact about it soon, reminding Yu-sung to stay ready too. With that, Lee Hyun turns to leave, but our hero calls out after him, asking if that is really all he came here to say. He keeps shouting as Lee Hyun walks away, calling him cold and insisting he should at least give them some kind of praise. Lee Hyun pauses, sighs, and finally turns back, telling our boy that he is indeed strong. He adds that the MC will become even stronger and that it won't be long before they see each other in a dungeon again. But before he leaves, he advises him to never forget the responsibility that comes with strength now that he is recognized as a talent, too. Back at home, the MC is excitedly showing off his profile to Ian, bragging about how impressive his potential is. He is clearly proud of what he has achieved so far. Ian, however, is too focused on her phone to give him much attention, replying just simply that he is great without much enthusiasm. Our boy doesn't seem to mind and continues talking, telling her that today is the last day she can treat him this casually. Starting tomorrow, he will be out exploring dungeons. Suddenly, he pauses and wonders aloud how to actually find these dungeons. He even asks himself if they might show up on Google Maps. Ian, still scrolling through her phone, responds without looking up, telling him there is a site for talents called Radar where dungeons are listed. Our hero, pulling out his own phone, says he had no idea about this and asks if she is some kind of expert on this stuff. Ian, not bothering to look up from her screen, simply tells him that he can find it on social media platforms. But in her mind, she is thinking that, at least in the past, he played games and spent time online. Lately, though, it feels like he is becoming a little less sharp. The MC continues to search through his phone and comes across a section labeled Dungeon Map, Monster Info, and notices that the site also recruits party members for dungeon runs. He remembers that the Kika Forest dungeon, the one he encountered before, was an F-rank dungeon and wonders if he could just tackle it on his own this time since it seems manageable. The thought excites him, and he decides that he is going to make a bunch of money and impress their mom with it. The news about the government's response to a large dungeon opening in Hangrai, the Ministry of National Defense, working with civilian ability user groups, has sealed off the city to stop further damage. However, people are worried about the residents stuck inside the sealed area. The Dangun Guild has announced that it will join the rescue operations. We then see Hyun tying his shoes while Ian nervously asks if he really plans to go alone. She tells him it's scary, but Hyun confidently says there's no need to worry. He reminds her that he's a tutorial graduate and tells her to stay home and wait for him. Ian looks worried and asks him to be careful and not get carried away. Hyun waves and tells her again not to worry. He promises to bring their parents back soon and heads out, looking angry and determined. Hyun reaches a military checkpoint, but he gets stopped. The soldiers tell him to turn back, but Hyun informs them he's an ability user and asks if he can go through. One soldier warns him it's dangerous without a party, but another says ability users are allowed through at their own risk. Hyun thanks them and continues his journey. While walking through the woods, Hyun thinks about the situation. There are 5 open dungeons nearby, including an E-rank dungeon. He hopes everyone is safe and calculates that he can arrive in 2 hours if no monsters appear. But unfortunately, a giant boar rams his car suddenly, throwing it off the road into a tree. The boar, with glowing red eyes, looks threatening. Hyun crawls out of the wrecked car, cursing his luck and mourning his car. He gets angry, so he pulls out his blade and swears to avenge it. Just as he's about to fight, he hears screeching and sees a group of goblins running towards him. Frustrated, Hyun jokes about whether he burned down a goblin country in his past life. Realizing he can't handle them all, he decides to run. He tells the boar to enjoy its time and escapes. Luckily, the goblins attack the boar instead, probably for food. Hyun sighs in relief, thinking that if they want to fight, they should fight each other. After all that hustle, without a car, he decides to focus on getting to his parents. As night falls, Hyun struggles to make progress on foot. His phone battery is at 20%, so he avoids using the flashlight to save power. He regrets not taking the main road and feels exhausted. Suddenly, he hears a noise and notices something sneaking up behind him. Turning quickly, Hyun slashes with his sword, and blood splatters everywhere. It's a druin, an invisible wolf. Hyun is surprised that monsters can turn invisible and realizes there are many of them around. As the wolves surround him, Hyun prepares for a fight. He strikes quickly, killing 5 druin in a row. Blood covers the ground as he keeps fighting through the night. By morning, the forest is filled with dead wolves. Hyun rests in a tree, tired from the battle. He thinks about how uncomfortable his sleeping spot was but decides it's time to move on. Back at his parents' apartment, Hyun's mother texts him, asking for updates. He replies, saying he'll arrive the next day and tells them to stay safe. Later, when Hyun stops replying, his mother becomes worried. She tells his father, but he tells her to stay quiet. He looks out the window and worries if Hyun can handle the monster that killed all the orcs nearby. Even though the orcs came from an F-rank dungeon, this new monster seems much stronger. The scene ends with Hyun laughing confidently, saying the orcs were just a warm-up, and he tells his parents that their adorable son is here. Hyun confidently fighting orcs. He jokes about how handling an F-rank dungeon alone is easy and says he isn't even tired as more orcs approach. Suddenly, Hyun spots 3 orc warriors, including a boss monster. Realizing this must be an E-rank dungeon instead of F-rank, he shouts for his parents to stay quiet, reassuring them he's here to save them. Inside the house, Hyun's parents hear his voice. They recognize it but are surprised at how much he has changed in just a few months. Meanwhile, Hyun charges at the 3 orc warriors, who roar in unison. He clashes with one, dodging another's attack by ducking. Hyun charges a magic explosion in his hand and slams it into the second orc's face, causing it to explode. Another orc warrior leaps at him, swinging its weapon. Hyun catches the weapon, but his wrist fractures from the force. Despite the pain, Hyun counterattacks, attacking the orc in the throat. He lifts the injured orc with his blade and throws it at the third, knocking it over. Without hesitation, Hyun finishes the last orc by shoving a magic explosion into its mouth, obliterating its head. As Hyun sits on top of the corpses, exhausted and bleeding, he notices an entire tribe of orc warriors surrounding him. Among them is a towering orc general, their leader. The general laughs deeply, and Hyun mocks its appearance, calling it ugly as hell. Realizing he can't conserve his magic anymore, Hyun activates his giant's power skill, boosting his strength by 60%. Hyun charges at the general, only to get hit in the face and knocked back. The orc warriors toss him back to the general, who kicks him hard in the chest, sending him flying. Hyun realizes the general is toying with him, and his body isn't regenerating as usual. Desperate, Hyun struggles to stand, gripping his blade tightly. Hearing his mother scream, Hyun turns to see orcs climbing toward his parents' window. Panicked, he screams for them to stay away and rushes to stop the orcs, only to be swarmed by the tribe. Hyun breaks free, slicing through limbs and heads as he runs toward the house. However, the general grabs him and slams his head into the concrete. With his vision blurring, Hyun stretches his hand out toward his parents' window before dying. Moments later, a flurry of sword strikes cuts the general into pieces. Tsun, the head of the Dangun Guild, has arrived. She draws out her sword as the general collapses. Her guild members report that they've secured the area and are evacuating injured residents. Han Se-yeon notes the damage was severe but praises the person who gathered the orcs in one place, reducing the chaos. When she asks about this hero, her team informs her that Hyun passed away. She orders them to handle his body with care, but when they turn back, to their surprise, Hyun's body is gone. The scene shifts to Hyun, who suddenly jolts awake. awake. Hyun wakes up on a tree branch, realizing he's resurrected. As a penalty, his level has dropped by 1, and his stats are reduced by 50% for 24 hours. He recalls the orcs climbing toward his parents and panics, realizing 24 hours have passed. Despite his weakened state, Hyun grabs a blade and rushes back to his parents. Upon arriving, Hyun finds the area deserted, including his parents' home. He wanders aimlessly all night until he comes across a military unit. Borrowing a phone from an officer, he calls Ian and learns devastating news. His father has lost both arms, and his mother is in a coma. Furious, Hyun crushes the phone. A 2-month time skip follows. The Dangun Guild is hunting bosses in a D-rank dungeon named Plains of Heiji, and Han Se-yeon discusses a new C-rank dungeon. Ian asks Hyun if he's going into a dungeon again, worried because he's already died 3 times that week. Hyun brushes her off, telling her he's fine. As Ian tries to reassure him it's not his fault his parents were hurt, Hyun silently leaves, leaving her looking concerned. Inside an E-rank dungeon, we see a party fighting a giant ant monster called an Antria. The party's ace, a spear-wielding man, celebrates leveling up, boasting about his skill and dreaming of joining the Dangun Guild. Suddenly, Hyun appears, rushing past them. Wayne's secret technique is an ability that increases all stats by 40%, excluding mana. The physical body breaks down over time. Wayne was a woman who lived only for battle and dedicated her life to it. Having pursued ever more intense battles throughout his life, Wayne finally succeeded in drawing out extreme power, even at the cost of destroying his own body. The party is shocked to see someone entering the dungeon alone and follows him out of concern. Meanwhile, Hyun uses a skill called Wayne's Secret, boosting his stats by 40% at the cost of his body deteriorating over time. He faces a massive swarm of Antria soldiers. He decides to use Wayne's secret technique for cutting and exploding Antria soldiers with devastating attacks fueled by his frustration and regret. The party catches up, stunned by Hyun's skill and brutality. Hyun reaches the dungeon core, ignoring the valuable magical crystals scattered around. He explains he doesn't have time for such things and leaves after destroying the core. As the party collects the crystals, they speculate about Hyun, wondering if he's the rumored man who clears dungeons alone. The spear wielder doubts it, as even Han Se-yeon and Dong-woo would struggle with an E-rank dungeon. Meanwhile, Hyun defeats the dungeon boss and gains a skill book called Anri Outer Shell, which hardens his skin, and Bilgeon S Longsword, which can increase strength and vitality by 1.5 times for 5 minutes. He reflects on his past mistakes and the importance of using skills wisely. Determined to get stronger, Hyun consumes the skill book, vowing to move forward without regrets. The dungeon gate opens, and hunters start coming out. Among them is a man holding a spear. A reporter rushes up to him, asking if he is the rumored hunter who clears dungeons alone. The man quickly denies it and points behind him, saying the person the reporter is looking for is coming out. Hyun steps out of the dungeon, looking tired and injured. One of his legs is half missing, slowly regenerating as he walks. He looks up and sees cameras flashing all around him. Reporters and guild recruiters swarm him, offering contracts and asking questions. Hyun brushes them off, denying all the rumors. He firmly asks them to move aside and let him through. As he pushes through the crowd, a reporter accidentally bumps into him. Hyun glares at the man, his anger rising, and looks like he's about to hit him. The reporter panics and apologizes. After a moment, Hyun calms down and decides to walk away without making a scene. Near his car, Hyun hears someone call out to him. Turning around, he sees a man approach him and introduce himself as a representative from the Talented Association Guild. The man hands Hyun a membership card, explaining that the guild focuses on helping talented hunters, not just making profits like other guilds. He assures Hyun that they can provide full support if he ever decides to join. The man tells Hyun there's no rush and leaves politely. Later, Hyun sits at home eating noodles, staring at the guild card. His thoughts shift to his biggest problem, mana. His skills, like Wayne's secret and body regeneration, consume almost all his mana, leaving him feeling heavy and slow. Skills like Antria Outer Shell don't suit him either, so he needs a solution. As he searches through his notes and information, he finds something interesting, a report about a dungeon called Goblin Village. It's said to drop items that can increase magic power. Without hesitation, Hyun decides to head there. The next day, Hyun arrives at the dungeon gate. Goblin Village was once a quiet hunting ground, but the Bait Guild has taken over, claiming it as their territory. The government doesn't intervene, as long as no major incidents occur. Hyun approaches the gate and notices no one is guarding it. He quietly opens the gate and steps inside. As he ventures deeper into the dungeon, he encounters a group of 3 hunters. They stop him, glaring at him with hostility. One of the hunters steps forward and warns Hyun that this is their territory. Hyun remains calm and asks why that matters. A female hunter smirks and tells him he has to pay a toll to pass. She adds that if he hands over everything he has, they might let him live. Hyun doesn't reply. Instead, he moves swiftly, attacking one of the men and knocking him out in a single blow. The other 2 hunters freeze in shock before drawing drawing their weapons. One of the hunters tries to attack Hyun from behind, but Hyun grabs his sword with his bare hand, stopping the strike completely. The hunter's face fills with disbelief. Hyun punches him with full force, sending him flying across the dungeon. Hyun walks over and stomps on him repeatedly until he stops moving. Suddenly, a mana explosion hits Hyun from behind. He turns around to see the female hunter trembling in fear. The attack does nothing to him. Instead of getting angry, Hyun thanks her with a twisted smile for teaching him something new. He walks toward her, grabs her hand, and says he'll teach her something in return. The dungeon echoes with her screams. She falls to the ground, clutching her injured hand, crying in pain. Hyun ignores her and moves on. Soon, more members of the bait guild arrive. One of them steps forward, drawing his sword, and warns Hyun to leave immediately. Hyun smirks, gripping his weapon tightly, ready for the next fight. The guy stands confidently in front of Hyun. Unfortunately, he gets a punch in his face all of a sudden. After some time, when he wakes up, he finds his entire team on the ground. He wonders how they all lost to one unarmed man. Hyun takes out the stabbed dagger from his belly. He orders all the others to gather in front of him within 5 seconds as he declares the guide selection starts now. It's Hyun's first exclusive guide selection. Through a fair evaluation, he has chosen Bait Guild's grunt Kim Sung-woo. He orders others to clap for him while they all are sitting in front of him in a badly injured state, reluctant to clap. But Hyun puts the dagger in the throat of one of them, forcing him to clap. The guy inquires what is going to happen to them now. Hyun questions him, "Will you stop doing evil acts and start living honest lives?" All of them agree. They tell him they will be good and they will never do anything bad again. Hyun begins to beat the guy again out of anger as he believes that guys like them always lie and do evil acts. Sung-woo looks scared to death. After a while, we witness the guys in terrible states. Hyun orders Sung-woo to come with him, and he agrees. Now at the time of sunset, Sung-woo is guiding Hyun through the dungeon. Hyun becomes suspicious of him, but Sung-woo assures him he is finding the path with the fewest monsters. But Hyun tells him he is getting bored, so they should encounter some of them. But soon he realizes it's getting dark, and it's not a good idea to fight against monsters at this time, so he decides to have some snacks. Sung-woo starts preparing food while Hyun relaxes beneath a tree. After some time, while they enjoy instant ramen to fill their stomachs, Hyun asks Sung-woo what he was doing here, doing something like that instead of staying at school. Sung-woo tells him he needed money to clear his school's debts. He could not apply for a scholarship because he kept taking part-time jobs to make matters worse. His father's business field and their situation got a lot worse. Then he continues to tell Hyun about his situation, but Hyun gets irritated, asking him why he is telling him all this. In fact, he is the one who asked him. Then he tells Sung-woo to stop talking nonsense and eat the ramen. Then he needs to rest up for tomorrow. At night, while they are having a rest, Sung-woo thinks it's the chance for him to get rid of Hyun. He is planning to kill Hyun, but he gets scared as he gets flashbacks from a previous fight, and he realizes that no matter how he thinks about it, he does not think he can kill him. He would rather just run away. He prepares to run, but Hyun wakes up calling him, asking him where he is going. Sung-woo tells him he has to go pee. Hyun tells him to do it here, and he will kill him if he thinks of running. The next morning, they reach near the goblin village, where the main core is located. Hyun can see a lot of mana gathered around there. Sung-woo believes Hyun is going to be dead soon, as in the goblin village dungeon, the monsters are concentrated near the main core. However, they regularly send scouts all around the field. The Bait Guild farmed by attacking these scouts, and none of these scouts have been killed yet. Because of that, the village has all of its troops. Sung-woo wonders if Hyun can survive against an entire E-rank dungeon. After a while we witness a horde of goblins coming towards Hyun, and Hyun is also going towards them in order to kill them. Taking advantage of the moment, Sung-woo decides to flee from there. Hyun gets furious as he decides Sung-woo is going to regret this. After a while we find Sung-woo near a tree trying to catch his breath. He believes Hyun will never be able to do something against all those goblins. But soon he receives notification that the dungeon's main core has been destroyed, and the portal to the outside gate has opened. He wonders, is this a dream? Sung-woo is shivering out of fear, thinking about Hyun's victory. Meanwhile the exit gate opens in front of him. He believes that in addition to great strength as well as endurance, overwhelming defense is the most important in order to wipe out this much number of enemies. And the second most important thing is decisiveness in the face of waves of enemies. While we witness Hyun fighting against all the goblins and then the goblin grand shaman, we also witness Sung-woo believing that Hyun is definitely some sort of exceptional strategist. After defeating the goblin grand shaman, Hyun receives a magical stone, the grand shaman's magical stone, which increases the magical powers of the wearer. While Hyun leaves the dungeon, he thinks of dealing with Sung-woo. But as soon as he comes out, his eyes find a number of people standing in front of him. He thinks they are here to fight against him. Moreover, he finds out Sung-woo is standing among the crowd as well, so he prepares himself for a fight, making a fist. But suddenly, a guy named Young Eui Hyun comes in front addressing to Hyun, declaring they are not here to fight, they just want to talk. He introduces himself and asks Hyun about his name, but Hyun refuses to tell him and asks what they want from him. Young Eui then tells him he wants Hyun to join their bait guild at the position of executive. Young Yu agrees of becoming the most significant guild by using Hyun as a figurehead, but unfortunately Hyun refuses his offer. Young Eui was already aware of this situation, so he got himself prepared. He offers Hyun his business card and tells him to take his time to think of this offer. Hyun quietly takes the card, but to Young Eui's surprise, Hyun suddenly begins to shatter it into pieces, throwing it at the face of him, insulting him, calling the bait guild a third-rate gang. Then he asks Young Eui if he wants to fight, but Young Eui smirks, replying that no, he is fine. Hyun then leaves from there cursing them as he thinks he wasn't able to take break because of them. The scene then ends with a questionable look from Sung-woo while he stares in a certain direction. In his car, Hyun believes he almost got killed by those 100 people if he fought with them as he was low on mana. Now back to the bait guild, a member blames Sung-woo that he volunteered to guide Hyun. Young Eui is about to punish Sung-woo, but he asks for forgiveness. Unfortunately, despite his willingness to do anything in exchange for his life, he gets brutally stabbed by Young Eui, as Young Eui believes Sung-woo is a traitor. Then he kicks Sung-woo, throwing him inside the dungeon. After committing the heinous act, he orders one of his subordinates to follow Hyun in order to find out everything about him. For the purpose of taking his revenge, he decides to target Hyun's weakness, which is his family members. At a restaurant, while enjoying beef, Hyun receives good news from his sister regarding his mother's speedy recovery. A smile on his face appears. Ayan mentions it's been a while since she last saw him smiling. Hyun mentions he smiles all the time, but his sister clears that creepy smile doesn't count. Suddenly Hyun feels pain in his stomach, so he decides to go to the restroom. While coming out of the restroom, Hyun notices an unknown guy standing near Ayan. He gets confused at that same moment. Ayan points towards him. The guy turns around and greets Hyun, which makes him confused further. After that the guy leaves from there. Hyun begins to tease Ayan about that guy, but she clears him, it's nothing like that, as well as she tells him in fact the guy was here to hand over this paper. Hyun checks the paper. He gets surprised as he finds it's from Young Eui, the vice master of Bait Guild. After few hours, Hyun and Ahyun reach at their building. While going toward the apartment, Ayan informs Hyun she wants to go to a convenience store to buy some drinks. But Hyun tells her to stay at home, and he will get the drinks for her. Ayan gets confused. After some time, after making all the purchases, while walking back home, Hyun is wondering regarding the Bait Guild's motives. He wonders if he should stop going to the dungeon and stay home. Soon he receives a call from his father. Her father gives him the good news that his mother has woken up. He gets a sigh of relief, but soon his happiness turns into tension as his father tells him about the hospital visit of his friend. He can't think of anyone who would. Soon his father tells him his name was Young Eui Hyun. After listening to that name, Hyun gets frustrated. The next day, at the talented education school, we see two girls discussing about Hyun and his friend. Hyun intimidated one of the girls named Myung at reception, while she tells the other girl she still gets nightmares about it. Out of the blue, Hyun appears behind them, making the girls scared to death. They begin to scream, calling the police. But soon they listen to Hyun asking about Mr. Kim Lee Hyun, stating that he wants to protect his family, so he needs that person. The girls inform him Mr. Kim Lee Hyun was a temporary instructor, so he's not here anymore. Now in a meeting room, Mr. Kim is hosting a meeting. A guy comes telling him a man with monster-like strength is making a ruckus in the lobby, saying he knows Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim gets confused and shocked. After a while, in the conference room, we see Hyun sitting in front of Master Kim. Kim asks about the purpose of the meeting, to which Hyun tells him he wants to hire him. Upon asking about details, Kim comes to know the Bait Guild is threatening Hyun's family as well as taunting him, so he needs a bodyguard, someone who can protect his family while he goes to beat them. Kim is confused about what Hyun wants to do. He informs him the Bait Guild is infamous already, that they are aware of them as well. However, they haven't been able to do anything about them because they have lacked justification. Hyun assures Kim he will destroy them for him. That will be a win-win situation for both of them. Kim believes Hyun is brutal as always, then he inquires about the reason why Hyun chose him to be the bodyguard of his family. Hyun shares Kim is the strongest talent he even knows. Kim asks him about Mr. and Yu-sung, and Hyun tells him he doesn't have his contact details. Then he requests Kim to protect his family for 1 week only. He is also willing to pay some serious money. Kim isn't trying to brag, but he mentions he is already earning quite a bit of money, probably much more than Hyun thinks. He also has a position as Vice Guild Master in the Dungan Guild. Then he suggests to Hyun that if he wants him to work for him, he will have to offer him something other than money. Hyun first gets confused, then he becomes embarrassed, believing Kim is after his body. Kim then gets serious and makes an offer first. According to him, it's not so grandiose to be called an offer, but if the job finishes all well, he would like for Hyun to meet their guild master. He believes Hyun still has to provide monetary payment, of course, but if he agrees to this condition, the guild will likely help him. After a while, Kim informs Hyun they have placed 5 bodyguards outside Hyun's mother's hospital ward and 5 more in the company where his sister is working. Hyun and Kim are in a car outside the building of the Bait Guild. Kim questions if he will be fine on his own. Hyun believes the guild isn't that big as compared to the Dungan Guild. Kim clears him, a guild size isn't determined by the size of their office. The Bait Guild possesses an abnormal number of dungeons, and they have some kind of backing. Kim warns Hyun as he suspects Bait Guild has definitely prepared all available forces, as Hyun has already informed them about his visit, as he had no choice back then because he wanted to buy some time to meet Kim. After that, Hyun decides to leave the car, giving the key to Kim, telling him to park it outside his home. Kim gets worried, but Hyun assures him it's not like what he is thinking, and he will explain everything to him tomorrow after he gets back alive and well. Then the scene shifts to Young Eui welcoming Hyun with hundreds of his men, mentioning they are here to welcome him as he is part of the Bai family as well. All of a sudden, Hyun gets furious, he activates Raging Lion's Roar, he screams, and then begins to hit the ground to break it. But Young Eui informs him he can't break it as it's made of reinforced steel. So Hyun activates Wayne's secret technique, Titan Strength and Swift Strike. He ultimately breaks the ground, and he and the members of Bait Guild fall down in a basement. Their Young Eui advises him to be rational, he believes they can be great partners. Then he apologizes to him as well for visiting his family. He believes Hyun and they together could even bring down the Dangun Guild. Hyun tells Young Eui he talks a lot. Young Eui proudly tells him there are currently over 200 guild masters in this building alone, and the amount of members in the entire country is several times that. The Bait Guild is only missing a figurehead, so they want Hyun, the absolute strongest person, to be the vanguard for their guild members to expand the guild beyond Korea. Hyun spits on his face, taunting him, giving an elementary schooler's presentation. Young Eui wipes his face, he gets angry, he believes Hyun is so lowly to understand his grand aspirations. Hyun begins to laugh hard, then he starts teasing Young Eui and others. Young Eui gets frustrated, so he orders all his men to kill him. The guys begin using their abilities, including mana restriction, mind corruption, fog, and confused senses, to attack Hyun, so he decides to activate the Raging Lion's Roar. He loudly shouts and orders all the opponents to get lost, all opponents' stats and morale have decreased. Young Eui calls them morons and again orders them to kill Hyun. Some more members come to attack Hyun, and this time he activates Antria's outer shell. A huge commotion is seen, and the members of the Bait Guild are jumping in the basement one by one to kill Hyun. The space gets filled with thunder, and after that we see slashes of swords. Hyun is killing the enemies one by one. Young Eui gets enraged, and then Hyun shouts, calling all the enemies to come to him. After a few hours the building of Bait Guild has been destroyed, the victims are panting heavily, blood splashes can be seen everywhere on the ground, and Hyun is still fighting against his rivals while Young Eui stands in front of him with a confused smile on his face. He accuses Hyun of being a murderer, he declares he is the same as them now. Hyun feels ridiculous, he suggests to Young Eui he should stop making him feel guilty as it's his waste of time. Hyun tells him if he is going to try to give someone, he has got to be ready to get killed. Young Eui gets irritated, he believes Hyun is acting so nonchalant for a man who is about to die. All of a sudden, Hyun gets surrounded by numerous tentacles emerging from the ground, a guy appears behind him with a longsword in his hand. Hyun looks at his reflection in the sword which has been passed through his body. Hyun is losing consciousness. Young Eui appreciates him for lasting this long with that many injuries. He wants to replace all the trash here with him. But he believes it would be bad to have an uncontrollable beast. He asks Hyun about his last words. Hyun curses him that he will find a hair in every stew he eats. Young Eui grabs Hyun's face and begins using his ability. Hyun is going through a lot of pain, so he screams. Hyun is burning while we see Young Eui lighting his cigarette. He gets informed that over 30 of his men are dead and 50 or so are seriously injured. This angers him as he believes he lost all those guys in exchange for nothing. Then he begins to leave from there, telling one of his men to grab the equipment Hyun will drop, believing that will help make up their losses. But everyone present there gets shocked as the corpse of Hyun has disappeared. At night, Hyun revived, he has lost 1 level, and his stats have been reduced by 50% for 24 hours. He enters the drawing room, and Ayan realizes his brother was dead again. 2 days later, at a dungeon under the Bait Guild possessions, Kika's Gorge, 2 guys are seen discussing the rumors about their guild. Soon they see someone coming toward them. It's a guy with a mask on his face. The two men are confused, they stare at each other, wondering what is with this weirdo? Hyun learned something from breaking in so recklessly that he could keep trying, but it would be no different than hitting a rock within an egg. Of course, he has infinite eggs, so it is not the worst idea, but he cannot put up with that many resurrection penalties. He needs to defeat the Bait Guild one at a time, so he decides to go inside the Bait Guild and destroy them piecemeal. The guy in the mask is definitely Hyun. He is choking one of the guys while the others can be seen on the ground dead. The guy is apologizing to Hyun, but after knowing that the guy doesn't have a particular reason to apologize, Hyun gets enraged and throws him far away. After that he gives him a pen, ordering him to write where all of Bait Guild's dungeons are. He assures him in exchange for that he will spare his life. While the guy writes all the information, Hyun questions him why they guys haven't caught up yet after killing so many lives. The guy doesn't know much about this, but he shared that the fact that the Bait Guild always chooses dungeons with no CCTV around probably helps. Then he gives Hyun a list of all the dungeons he knows about. After thanking the guy, Hyun burns him to death as well, believing he won't get caught. Young Eui is feeling embarrassed after listening to bad news about his guild on television. He made the excuse that the captured monster is released from the guild. He cannot believe that he had to use the excuse he had saved for emergencies just to cover up the fact that he had to take care of one psycho. Suddenly the door opens and a man enters, telling him they have a problem, but before he could complete his sentence, he gets attacked. The attack was from Young Eui. He questions him how dare he open the gate and come inside his office like that. The guy apologizes, then he informs Young Eui that Hyun has appeared again. Young Eui gets pissed off. The guy informs him 7 of their dungeons have already been trashed by Hyun, and more than 100 of their guild members are dead. Young Eui orders his man that there will be no more rotating shifts from now on, send everyone into the dungeon and have them take turns sleeping. The guy leaves the room. Young Eui begins to think about 5 days ago, when Hyun attacked them and his corpses disappeared. Now 2 days later someone began attacking their dungeons. Young Eui knew this, he had been considering this for a while, but now with so much evidence, it's painfully obvious that Hyun must have had an accomplice. He believes the corpse must have been taken with some skill. He thinks there is not enough information to form countermeasures. Now he has no choice, so he decides to make a call to someone asking for help. The guy begins to tease him regarding all the news circulating around. Young Eui is getting frustrated. The guy questions him about what he has to offer in exchange for help. Young Eui offers him a fight, an entertainment fight. Then he explains that there is only one target who is not the same as some average guy. The guy assures him he will be satisfied, and to our surprise, the guy is none other than Hyun's best friend, An Sung. Now at night, outside a dungeon entrance, we see An with a guy protecting the gate waiting for Hyun. Someone approaches them. He is Hyun with a mask on his face. An looks at him, his ability card, Sixth Sense, gets activated, telling him if he does not want to die, then he has to run from this monster standing in front of him right now. Hyun gets confused. He recognizes An questioning him what he is doing here. An also recognizes Hyun's voice and gets confused. An asks Hyun why he is here and quickly realizes that Hyun is the one who has been attacking the Bait Guild. Hyun guesses that An is still wandering around looking for fun things to do. He remembers Kim mentioning the backing of the Bait Guild and suspects that An, being very rich, could be their supporter. Hyun places his sword at An's throat and asks if he's part of the Bait Guild. An denies it, saying, "Don't lump me in with those trashy delinquents, it'll hurt my feelings." Hyun then asks why An is here. An explains that young Eui Hyun, the Bait Guild master, got on his knees as well as begged him for help. An found it amusing to see such a prideful man begging. Hyun is speechless but decides to head into the dungeon, telling An not to bother him. He also invites him to grab food together sometime. As Hyun realizes he does not have An's contact details, An suddenly attacks him from behind, striking his weapon against Hyun's head. Hyun turns to look at him angrily, while An chuckles, saying it would be boring if Hyun left so easily. Enraged, Hyun prepares to fight, warning An that he won't hold back just because they used to be friends. To Hyun's surprise, An wants the same. Hyun activates his skills and attacks An. An narrowly avoids a serious injury but ends up with a cut on his face. The two former best friends engage in an intense battle. Although fighting like this hinders Hyun's plans, he wants to finish it quickly. However, he feels nervous because it's been a long time since he had a proper fight. Seeing Hyun's expression, An guesses that Hyun is also enjoying the fight. Suddenly, a member of the Bait Guild jumps into the fight, running toward Hyun with a longsword. The guild member hopes to impress and one day become an executive, but An kills him on the spot for interrupting his fun fight. Hyun is shocked at how easily An killed the man. An brushes it off, explaining that he just wanted wanted to enjoy the fight with Hyun and does not want Hyun to hate him. Hyun, with a weird expression, says Yu is already hated. Yu then reveals something shocking. Young, the bait guild leader, is the illegitimate child of the MO conglomerate chairman. That's why he can act recklessly with his grunts. Hyun gets frustrated and questions why Yu is telling him this. Does he expect Hyun to back off just because Young's family is powerful? Hyun refuses, saying he wouldn't have started this if he was afraid of such things. He tells Yu not to interfere and begins to leave. Yu stops him as well as suggests Hyun listen to everything first. He wants to join Hyun's plan because he also wants to see Young angry. The next morning, Young is furious over the news that 3 dungeons have been stolen from his guild. To make matters worse, Yu has cut contact with him. Young orders all guild members to gather by 8 o'clock the next day, regardless of their personal situations. Soon, he hears even more bad news. Many guild members have recently quit and cut ties completely. Young becomes brutal, ordering his men to take the parents of those who left hostage to force their return. One of his men hesitates, explaining that the guild's atmosphere is uneasy and that forcing members to attack their own could lead to rebellion. Young, overwhelmed with anger, screams in frustration. At that moment, he gets a call from an unknown number. The voice on the line says, "It seems like you're in a tough spot." Recognizing the voice, Young starts to believe the situation might be resolved more easily than expected. Meanwhile, after destroying multiple dungeons over the week, Hyun feels it's time to wrap up his plan. Yu asks about his next move, and Hyun whispers something to him. Hearing it, Yu grows suspicious, wondering if Hyun is even sane. The next day, Young is as furious as ever because he receives a meeting invitation from Hyun. Young is eager to see Hyun's face and imagines separating his skin from his bones. All the guild members gather behind Young, driven by fear of his wrath. Listening to his subordinates' negative comments only fuels Young's rage. He regrets not being able to convince the person who called him that day to offer help in this dire situation. On that day, Young was excited and asked for the man's help, promising a handsome reward and even his father's support. However, the mention of his father enraged the man, who instantly changed his mind, cutting off the call and mocking Young for depending on his father. Meanwhile, in an office elsewhere, the same man, Choi Min-jun, discusses the end of the bait guild with his subordinate. The subordinate suggests sending reinforcements since they still maintain a good relationship with the bait guild on the surface. However, Choi dismisses the idea, calling the guild trash and unworthy of his help. The subordinate warns him that the president, Jong Sang-soo, won't sit still if something happens to Young. This frustrates Choi, who grabs the man by the neck, choking him in anger. The subordinate gasps for air and apologizes, and Choi eventually lets him go. As the subordinate struggles to catch his breath, Choi orders him to find another financial backer for their operations. At the D-rank dungeon in the Deslupin forest, Young is seething with anger over the mysterious thief who summoned him there but hasn't shown up. He wonders if it's just a trick to waste his time. Frustrated, Young orders his men to stay on guard. Suddenly, one of his men points in a certain direction, drawing everyone's attention. They see someone approaching. It's Hyun, with a horde of monsters following him. Young is stunned to see Hyun alive. Hyun greets Young with a smirk as well as reveals a gift for him, a Deslupin pup. Then, Hyun tosses the pup into the air. One of the guild members catches the pup and, surprisingly, blushes as he holds it, wanting to pet it. As the guild members are distracted by the adorable pup, Young quickly realizes Hyun's true intention. He kidnapped the pup to lure the other Deslupin monsters there. Hyun throws more pups into the air, and the guild members scramble to catch them. Seizing the moment, Hyun rushes toward Young as well as strikes the ground near him, creating chaos. The commotion worsens as the Deslupin monsters, now enraged, charge at Young and his men. Hyun uses the opportunity to escape. The guild members find it difficult to fight the Deslupins, as the creatures can turn invisible. Adding to the chaos, Hyun's dramatic entrance disrupted their formation. Unable to regain control, Young orders a retreat. The guild members begin to flee, heading toward the dungeon's exit. Just as they near the gate, Yu appears out of nowhere. Without hesitation, he launches a brutal attack on the fleeing guild members, catching them off guard. Yu is ruthlessly killing the members of the bait guild one by one. Young is horrified to see the betrayal, shocked that Yu has turned against them. His carefully laid plan has failed, but he clings to hope, believing there must still be a way out of this mess. Watching his men being slaughtered by Yu and Hyun, Young feels helpless and increasingly frustrated. With no other options left, he decides to use his last resort. As Hyun kills another guild member in a brutal manner, he begins to grow impatient, thinking there's no end to this fight. Suddenly, Young's voice cuts through the chaos, shouting Hyun's name. Hyun turns to see Young's body engulfed in flames. He has activated self-immolation, a desperate as well as deadly skill. Young charges at Hyun, fully intent on taking him down with him. The heat from the flames creates a massive commotion, burning everything in its path. Young's skill is so powerful that it even endangers his own life. However, as the fire rages, Young is stunned to see Hyun emerge unscathed, gripping his face with a calm demeanor. To Hyun, the fire is nothing more than mildly warm. Hyun retaliates, striking Young and hurling him to the ground. He warns Young to stay put, making it clear that he'll be the last to die. Hyun wants him to watch as every single one of his subordinates is killed. One by one, Hyun and Yu eliminate the remaining guild members, leaving Young to witness the complete destruction of his guild. Young is overwhelmed with despair. It's over. Everything is over. He realizes he made a fatal mistake by crossing the wrong person. With his mind shattered, he starts laughing uncontrollably, a chilling sound in the midst of the carnage. Even as the fighting ends, Yoong's laughter echoes. As Hyun and Inu approach him, Yoong begins to reflect on his life. He believes he's finished, but deep down, he refuses to accept his fate. He recalls being an illegitimate child, an outsider, a bastard, someone his siblings ignored as well as his father supported out of pity. His father's sympathy felt like a double-edged sword, one that tore him apart even more. When the world changed, bringing awakeners and dungeons into existence, Yoong saw it as his opportunity to rise. For the first time, he believed he could change his destiny. But before he can finish telling his story, Hyun slashes him, ending his life. Hyun watches as Yoong takes his last breath, then thanks Inu for his assistance. He admits that killing the Bait Guild members was satisfying. They deserved it. As he picks up items dropped from the fight, Hyun notes the decent amount of money he's been earning from dungeon clearance rewards. However, he realizes that neither his strength nor the money is enough to protect everything. With this in mind, Hyun decides to form his own faction. That night, while walking, he casually mentions to Inu his idea of starting a guild. Inu immediately expresses his willingness to join, surprising Hyun with his eagerness. At that moment, neither of them could have known that the small guild they jokingly planned to create would go on to become the most infamous guild in Korea, albeit for all the wrong reasons. The scene moves to the chairman's office, where the president is furious with Choi. He accuses Choi of breaking his promise. Choi had assured the president he would take care of Jong Eui Hyun and had even helped raise him to lead a major guild. Now, the president feels Choi has failed in his duty. Choi does not take the accusation seriously and acts like he does not know what the president is talking about. This makes the president even angrier. It's been a week since he last heard from his son, but Choi does not seem to care. Instead, Choi brags about how he took someone like Jong, who had no skills, as well as made him the leader of an important guild. Choi believes he has already done more than enough. The president, losing his temper, orders his men to attack and kill Choi. The men activate their powers and move toward Choi, but he stays calm. With ease, Choi uses his abilities to grab the men by their necks as well as lift them into the air. Choi angrily reminds the president of their agreement, saying he has done everything he was supposed to do. He warns the president not to try something like this again, or there will be consequences. The president, now scared, quickly agrees. Choi lets the men go, and they fall to the ground. Before leaving, Choi smirks and tells the president to make sure the promised money is paid by the end of the day. As he begins to walk away, Choi wonders who could have defeated Jong Eui Hyun and brought down the Bait Guild. The sudden fall of the Bait Guild caused chaos in the media and among guild circles. Many rumors as well as scary stories spread, but as time passed, the guild was forgotten. New guilds and strong individuals kept appearing, and people moved on. Later, Hyun and Inu are having a meal together. Hyun feels upset because the system has given him the title Ruthless House Destroyer. He worries that this title will make people fear him and bring more problems. Inu tries to cheer him up, saying that nothing about Hyun has visibly changed, so there's no reason to worry. While they are talking, Hyun gets a call. It's from Kim Lee Hyun of the Dangun Guild. Kim reminds him of his earlier promise to meet the guild's leader. The next day, Hyun and Inu go to the Dangun Guild's headquarters. On the way, Inu mentions that he has met the guild master before at a party. Hyun thinks about how unfair life is. The guild master comes from a wealthy family as well as is also a tutorial graduate, giving her advantages that most people don't have. At the reception, they are guided to the guild master's office. A confident woman introduces herself as Han Sa-yeon, the master of the Dangun Guild. She warmly greets Hyun and asks him to sit. Hyun thanks Han for her guild's help and offers to do anything to repay her, but Han surprises him by saying that she does not need repayment. Curious, Hyun asks why she wanted to meet him. Han smiles and says she has a proposal. She asks if Hyun would like to join the Dangun Guild and work with them. Hyun immediately declines the offer, leaving Han confused by his firm decision. Han listens carefully to Hyun's firm decision and nods. She says she completely understands Hyun's decision and that his answer makes it easier for her to let go of the idea. Hyun promises to repay her in some other way and asks her to contact him if she ever needs his help. Han smiles and reassures him that it's not necessary. Having someone as strong as him on their side, even if just as a favor, is already enough. She says she'll reach out if the time comes. Then Han asks Hyun a serious question. How long does he think the current peace will last? Hyun is surprised by the question. He looks at the world around him, where criminals have been running wild ever since dungeons started appearing. He wonders if this can even be called peace. Han mentions the chaos she saw during the 8th stage of the tutorial. Hyun says he does not know what will happen, but for now, the only thing he can do is get stronger. Han tells him something shocking. She explains that the Haken dimension has a countdown of only 3 years. After that, some countries might struggle to survive. Humanity does not have much time left to prepare. She also reveals that there is a godlike being who knows about everything happening. Her guild even has an awakener who can communicate with this being. Hyun thinks she must be talking about the administrator. Han notices this and asks if Hyun has also felt it. The dungeons are getting harder, but awakeners aren't growing stronger fast enough to keep up. Han believes only brave and strong people like Hyun can deal with these problems. She tells him that he could become a hero for humanity. She also says she does not care about guilds like the Bait Guild because they don't help anyone and aren't worth protecting. For her, one person like Hyun is more valuable than hundreds of selfish guild members. After a while, Kim enters the room and tells Han that Hyun and Inu have left. Han then talks about Hyun. She says he surprised her with how capable he is. When she mentioned the administrator, she saw a spark of recognition in his eyes. This made her sure that Hyun is a tutorial graduate. The scene changes to a D-rank dungeon called Diance Research Institute. Hyun is there, standing in the middle of many dead monsters he has killed. Suddenly, a massive ogre chimera named Dur appears in front of him. Hyun calmly looks at the beast and asks if it wants to join his guild. The beast roars and raises its weapon, attacking Hyun with all its strength. But Hyun dodges the attack and fights back, hitting the beast hard. Despite his strong strikes, the chimera only has small injuries and stands tall. Hyun becomes even more determined. His eyes darken, and he feels a strong urge to win. He wants the hammer that the chimera is holding and decides to fight with everything he has. Nearby, a group of adventurers hears the loud noises from Hyun's fight. One of them says that someone must be hunting monsters. Another one, less interested in the sounds, suggests they focus on the treasure right in front of them, a young girl standing nearby. But before they can approach the girl, they hear heavy footsteps. The sound grows louder and closer. Suddenly, they see someone walking toward them, dragging a massive, blood-soaked hammer. It's Hyun, and he is covered in blood. His face shows a creepy smile that makes the adventurers freeze in fear. Hyun looks at them and speaks in a cold, threatening tone. "I can smell it," he says. "The smell of weaklings. Trash. Third-rate criminals I can easily crush." The group stands frozen, unsure if they should fight or run, as Hyun's terrifying presence grows closer and closer. The bad guys are confused. They wonder who Hyun is or what he is dragging behind him. Hyun starts walking towards them, using all his strength to raise the giant hammer in the air. After a moment, everyone is shocked to see Hyun standing there, holding the hammer high over his head. One of the guys wonders what will happen if Hyun decides to swing the hammer in such a narrow place. Before he can finish his sentence, Hyun swings the hammer down hard, hitting the ground with a loud crash. The guys are scared to death. They quickly take out their weapons and get into defensive positions. Hyun realizes the hammer is too heavy. It's impractical for him to use it as his main weapon. He decides to put it away for now. Everyone stands still, staring at him in confusion. One of the guys chuckles, wondering what's going on with Hyun when he shows his strength. He thinks Hyun doesn't understand the situation. Suddenly, the guy runs toward Hyun, shouting for him to die. Hyun easily dodges the attack and punches the guy hard in the face. The force of the punch sends the guy crashing to the ground. The others are terrified to see this. Hyun grabs the guy by his hair, places his sword on the guy's throat, and threatens the others to give him everything they have. One of the guys gets angry and orders his team to attack Hyun, thinking he's alone and vulnerable. But Hyun knows it's pointless to take a guy as a hostage. He decides to take another approach. He hurts the hostage, throwing him at one of his attackers with full force. The impact severely injures the attacker, causing the others to hesitate. Hyun goes crazy and yells for them to come at him. He tells them he'll beat them all with his new weapon, Gushik, the battering ram. He moves towards them, and the others become even more scared. Hyun begins attacking them with powerful strikes. After a while, the scene is a pile of injured guys lying on the ground. Hyun sits beside them, looking at the damage he has caused. He guesses that they are a D-ranked clear party, which is why it takes him a little longer to defeat them. The girl, who has been watching from the side, approaches him. She thanks him, saying that because of him, she didn't meet a terrible end. Hyun smiles and tells her it's fun beating them. He tells her to raise her head. The girl looks up at him and introduces herself as Shin Sung-ah. She asks Hyun his name, and he introduces himself in return. Shin calls him sir and asks what she has to do to become strong like him. Hyun is shocked by her question. This is the historic moment when South Korea's worst troublemakers are united. But it will still be a little while before they realize that. Hyun looks at Shin and asks if she really wants to become stronger. He tells her that strength only comes to those who put in effort. She nods, saying she has already worked hard. But Hyun shakes his head and tells her not all effort is the same. She has to be willing to die for it. Shin stays silent, thinking about his words. Then Hyun laughs, realizing how strange it is for someone like him, who revives when he dies, to say something like that. He tells her to be careful on her way back and that she can do whatever she wants with the guys on the ground. As he walks, he suddenly stops and asks if she can even leave on her own. Shin admits she can't. Hyun sighs and says that in situations like this, most people ask for help. He tells her that he would like to help, but he can't leave just yet as he came here to clear the entire dungeon. Shin thinks for a moment and then asks if she can go with him. Hyun is surprised and asks if it's because of what he said earlier about being willing to die. He tells her to forget about it, it was just a figure of speech. Shin shakes her head. She tells him that's not the reason. She knows her place and promises to follow him as silently as possible. She'll mine mana stones and stay out of his way. All of the stones will be his. Hyun thinks for a moment, then warns her that it will be dangerous. But Shin is confident. She says she can protect herself. Hyun nods and tells her to follow him. As they move forward, they come across a pile of dead monsters on the ground. Hyun has just finished killing them all. Shin watches him and nods. "You did well," she says, then pulls out her knife and starts cutting the monsters open to collect mana stones. Hyun observes her work. She does it quickly and efficiently. He realizes that she really might be able to protect herself. He wonders if she has a stealth skill, because during the fight, she stayed back and supported with her bow. She never got in his way, and now she's even collecting the mana stones he usually leaves behind. He thinks this might make his life a lot easier. He looks at her and asks what she wants to do next. He tells her that from the energy he feels, the boss room is just up ahead. But it could be really dangerous. Shin looks at him with determination. She says she has already made up her mind. She will follow him until the end. Before they can move forward, a system message appears. It says the dungeon's main core has been destroyed, and the portal to the outside world has opened. Hyun and Shin are both surprised. Hyun wonders if someone cleared the dungeon before him, but that doesn't make sense. He can still feel the boss's energy, and it's strong. Suddenly, he realizes what's happening. This is a dungeon break. Korea's very first D-rank dungeon break. Meanwhile, on the news, reporters announce that in a suburb of Seoul, 10 dungeons have opened at once, causing a monster wave. They call this the February 8th dungeon incident, the third one in the country's history. But unlike the previous incidents, this wave was created by terrorists. At the Hunter Association, a man rushes in to inform the president about the situation. The president, Choi Dong-woo, listens carefully. This is the first time he is officially introduced. Dong-woo says he has finished his preparations, but the man tells him there is a D-rank dungeon among the ones that broke. Dong-woo asks for the location. "It's the Research Institute," the man replies. Dong-woo gets startled. Of all places, it had to be that one. He mutters that the dungeon wasn't cleared before because it was tricky. Now, it's coming back to bite him. He asks if there are any major guilds available. The man replies that only the Hangul Guild is available, but their main members are on a business trip. Dong-woo makes a quick decision. He orders 50 elite members to gather immediately. They will go to Suwon, where the institute is. The rest will split up and clear the other dungeons. At the Donggan Guild, Han asks about the situation. Kim tells her that Dong-woo himself is heading to the research institute with elite members. Han believes at this rate, they're going to be late. Are there any guilds that can defend until they arrive? Kim hesitates. He says that aside from Hangul, only smaller guilds are available. However, there is one person who is eliminating monsters at an insane speed. Han asks for more details. Kim describes him saying he has a big sword, he's built like a tank, and his face is. Han immediately smiles. She knows exactly who he's talking about. She says, if it's him, then we don't have to worry. Meanwhile, in the streets, Hyun is fighting alone. He is cutting down monsters left and right, sacrificing his own kind. The others around him are shocked. They can't believe how many monsters he has already killed. Someone asks if this is really the level they should be at. A man approaches Hyun, thanking him for saving them. He asks how they can repay him. Hyun looks at him. Get the hell out of here if you don't want to die. The man is confused. But then, the area begins to distort. Hyun sighs. This is why. The crack isn't closed yet. He grips his sword tightly. The boss monster is still here. Hyun looks at the group and tells them the boss isn't here yet. He warns them that if they stay, they will die a dog's death. The group is surprised, but one man decides to speak up. He steps forward and tells Hyun to wait. He says that no matter how they look, they are all talented. Even if it's just a little, they can help. Hyun calls out to the man and asks what he wants. He then asks how many Cheerus he has killed. The man hesitates, and Hyun gets in his face, asking if he's ever killed even one. He tells the group that even if they're all here, they'll just be a nuisance. He tells them to help evacuate the civilians instead if they understand. The man starts to freeze up, trying to explain himself. The others in the back are confused about Hyun's behavior. One of them whispers that Hyun is strong. Another man glances at Hyun's face and sees his rage. He laughs nervously and says they should probably listen to him. The group leaves, just as Hyun wanted. Hyun sighs in relief that they're finally gone. But Shin is still standing there, looking at him nervously. She doesn't know what to say. Hyun looks at her and says that she can handle this. He's talking about sniping. Shin asks what he means, and Hyun tells her that he'll be counting on her to cover him. He tells her to find a place to hide and asks if she can do that. Shin is surprised that he's giving her the chance, but she nods and agrees. Meanwhile, back at the rift, something steps out. It's not just one monster, it's 3. Hyun sees them and asks, "What the hell is this?" He jokes that it's the 4 heavenly kings, but then realizes there are only 3. Hyun knows that each of these monsters is as strong as the ogre he fought earlier. With the boss behind them, he knows this isn't going to be easy. The monsters step forward, and one of them starts laughing, its jaw rattling. It floats up into the sky, above the other 3. Hyun watches, and the rift begins to close. Suddenly, a voice speaks. The Lich says, "These buildings sure are strange." Hyun is caught off guard. This monster is talking. The Lich looks down at him and asks if he's really planning to stand in his way alone. Hyun answers confidently, "Of course I am." He reaches into his inventory and pulls out his giant hammer, slamming it forward. One of the monster's bodies is instantly turned into a pile of meat chunks. Hyun yells that he's going to smash the Lich's head and turn it into a puzzle. The Lich gets a little annoyed and calls Hyun arrogant. He looks at Hyun's body and thinks he seems like a good target. Hyun, not interested in the Lich's words, tells him to stop talking. He asks if they can just have a duel, leader to leader, and leave the minions out of it. The Lich doesn't hesitate. He says, "Nah." Hyun spits in his hand and says he wasn't expecting anything anyway. He grips his hammer tightly and raises it. With a battle cry, he charges forward toward the monsters. The monsters retaliate, charging at him. A full-on brawl is about to begin. Hyun takes a deep breath, then yells, activating his lion's roar. The roar stuns all 3 heavenly kings, freezing them in place. Hyun leaps into the air, shouting that for now, he's just going to kill them. He focuses on the turtle-like monster and smashes its head with his hammer, over and over. The Lich stands by, watching the battle. It seems amused. It notices that Hyun isn't using any mana. The Lich asks if Hyun is just relying on raw strength. The Lich thinks for a moment. It decides that it would be a waste to kill Hyun now. Slowly, the Lich raises its hand and says it plans to keep Hyun alive. It wants to make him a slave. Hyun gives the turtle monster one last big hit. He thought its head would explode, but instead, its helmet cracks and flies off, showing the same goblin face he saw earlier. The turtle falls on its back. Hyun lands on his feet, shaking. He mutters, "This thing is way too heavy." Meanwhile, the Lich raises its hand, sending out a red aura toward Hyun. When it hits him, Hyun's pupils start to cloud, showing that the mind control is working. The Lich thinks it has full control over Hyun now. The Lich says that Hyun is now its slave and tells him to bow down and prove his loyalty. To the Lich's surprise, Hyun opens his mouth and raises his hand slowly. Instead of obeying, Hyun flips the Lich the bird and says he was just playing with it the whole time. He has a ring that protects him from mind control. The Lich is confused. It realizes that Hyun used an item to protect himself. It's disappointed because it wanted to keep Hyun alive. Suddenly, the Tiger Man charges forward with a punch. It's too fast for Hyun to dodge, so he uses his skill to harden his face. The punch still hits him hard, sending him flying into a store. The store explodes when he hits it. The tiger and the snake monster start walking toward the store, but then an arrow comes flying in from behind and hits the tiger in the head. The Lich is surprised. It didn't know Hyun had a companion. But the Tiger Man brushes the arrow off like it's nothing. Hyun calls out to Shin, "Great timing." When the Lich looks back down, Hyun is already crouching and running at full speed with his giant hammer. He tightens his grip and says, "That's the perfect place to hammer in a nail." He swings the hammer, driving the arrow completely through the tiger's skull. The tiger falls over and dies. The hammer in Hyun's hands is huge, making the hit even stronger. Now, only the snake is left. The snake swings its tail at Hyun. When Hyun turns, the tail hits him right in the chest. He grits his teeth and drops the hammer but grabs the tail. He lifts the snake into the air and throws it hard into the concrete. While the snake is stunned, Hyun pulls out his sword and charges at it. The snake turns to face him, but before it can react, Hyun swings his sword. He cuts through the snake again and again until it's torn to pieces. After a few moments, the sound of his blade stops. The snake's body is covered in blood. The Lich looks impressed. Hyun stands over the snake's remains, clearly letting out all his anger. He wipes the blood from his face and says, "Looks like there's only one left." Hyun turns back to the Lich and calls it Baldy. The Lich glares down at him, taunting, asking how someone with no remaining mana plans to fight. Hyun locks eyes with the Lich, acknowledging that it's noticed. He's out of mana and his regeneration is reaching its limit. More than that, he has no way to strike while the lich floats. He doesn't even have the strength to jump or throw his weapon. If he had his full strength, it would be different, but his legs are shaking. Suddenly, Hyun feels a sharp pain in his chest. His heart begins to pulse, as if something is gripping it. Blood pours from his nose, and his head starts to spin. He begins coughing up chunks of blood, his legs giving out as he collapses to the ground. Looking up at the lich, he gasps, asking what the hell it did to him. The lich calmly explains that it's already taking effect. It asks if Hyun thought the earlier stab was just a simple melee attack. It was meant to slowly eat away at his insides. There was no reason not to add poison. The lich tells Hyun he has no chance of victory now. He offers the antidote if Hyun surrenders and becomes his slave. Hyun starts to laugh, his voice raspy. He refuses, saying he already told the lich he's going to break its skull and turn it into a puzzle. His eyes light up with a red aura, and he declares he'll use what little mana he has left to cure the poison. He's going to gamble everything on his last resort, his sword's ability, Berserker, which increases his strength and vitality by 1.5 times for 5 minutes, though it comes with severe after effects. Hyun releases even more aura than he did when he was at his peak. He tells the lich to come down here. Even if he has to go to the afterlife, he'll take the lich with him. Then, a voice calls out. It's Dongwoo. Enough, Dongwoo says, walking toward Hyun. I don't know who you are, but you've done something incredible. I, the talented association president, will take it from here. Hyun recognizes him as the tutorial graduate and president of the association. Dongwoo tells Hyun he has serious injuries and needs to rest. Hyun insists he can still fight, but as soon as he says it, exhaustion hits him hard. He drops to his knees, barely managing to stay upright. He mutters in frustration that he almost had it, but now he's out of energy. He sighs, irritated that Dongwoo showed up in such a uselessly cool way. The scene shifts to a hospital. Hyun opens his eyes and sees Ayan sitting beside him. Hyun grins weakly, saying he can't believe he's seeing her shitty face right when he wakes up. Ayan claps back, saying she can't believe he's using those words as soon as he opens his eyes. She asks why he didn't just die, since hospital fees are expensive. Hyun laughs, asking why she's saying that to her brother. He then asks what happened with the dungeon break. Ayan says she doesn't know the full details, but she heard it went well. She's surprised to hear about his hospitalization and came in only to find Dongwoo, who she recognized from TV. Hyun thinks about it for a moment and recalls the card he received from Sun Woo. He mutters that he doesn't feel like he owes him anything this time. Ayan warns him not to push himself, especially with his unique ability. She points out that who's to say the next time he dies won't be permanent. Hyun grumbles, feeling like she's jinxing him. He asks if she thinks he dies because he wants to, and complains that every time he dies, his level gets cut down, and it feels like crap. As he speaks, Hyun notices how worried Ayan looks. He realizes that she's probably right. He scratches his head, sighing, and tells her he'll try to take it easy. The scene shifts again to the talented association. Sunwoo asks Dongwoo if he knows Hyun. Dongwoo says no, but he recalls seeing Sunwoo's name on a report. Sunwoo asks why Dongwoo personally evacuated Hyun and even paid for his hospital fees. Dongwoo laughs, saying he witnessed the birth of a new hero. He jokes that it's not every day he gets the honor of helping someone like that. Sunwoo asks how it went with the lich. Dongwoo pauses, looking serious. He says the lich ran away,